Chapter 575. Oh my God, Chaos Invasion? Just when many senior monks of the Temple of Heaven were horrified by the sudden change, Wang Wu, who single-handedly planned Ask the Heaven, also slammed the table and stood up. Before this, she had carefully deduced all kinds of situations that might happen during Ask the Heaven and made plans one by one, but none of the possibilities she deduced included this scene. In the distance, the purple flame that erupted from the depths of the earth was undoubtedly the fire of chaos, the ubiquitous demonic fire that ignited the chaotic world. That kind of flame was strongly infectious and corrosive, and was considered a symbol of filth and degeneration. And when the fire of chaos appeared in the heavenly earth, it meant that the Chaos Invasion War had begun. The arrival of the heaven, the invasion of chaos. This was not a coincidence. When Ping Shiwang sacrificed herself to receive the will of the heaven, Wang Wu could clearly feel that the structure of the entire heavenly earth had undergone subtle changes. Then the demonic fire soared to the sky. From the cave opened by the demonic fire, thousands of chaotic creatures surged out and greedily looked at this beautiful land. At the same time, the female cultivators of the heavenly earth fell into a great panic. The chaos invasion had happened more than once, but none of them were so sudden and so aggressive. Don't panic. The leader of the Temple of Heaven issued a sharp voice, which was so piercing that it made people feel like their heads were splitting. But it also expelled the panic and confusion in everyone's heart in an instant and stabilized the situation. This is not the first time we have seen this kind of scene, and I'm afraid it will not be the last. It's not a big deal. The establishment of the Temple of Heaven is to deal with this scene. We have the blessing of the heaven. In the past we have won countless victories, and in the future we will continue to win. Now, under the gaze of the heaven, let us completely expel the chaotic creatures. After the speech, the situation in the venue finally stabilized, but there were also people who questioned, why can the chaotic creatures openly invade here under the witness of heaven? Just now, Ping Shiwang. Before he could finish, he was rudely interrupted by Changtian. That was not Ask the Heaven. It was just a despicable trick that made us unable to stop her in time. Under the watchful eyes of the public, she desecrated the heaven through the evil sacrifice, so the heaven punished us. So that's how it is, really despicable and vicious. It was my dereliction of duty. Although I've long seen through her wild ambition, I didn't expect that she would actually collude with the chaotic species in the lower realm. If I had known earlier, I would have risked my life to kill her. Enough, now is not the time to pursue responsibility. Changtian said solemnly. Capture the two people who came with her first. They are important suspects and might know something. But when she turned around, she was surprised to find that the two people who were still in shock a moment ago had disappeared without a trace. Find them for me. Yes. At the same time 100 li away, Wang Lu leaned against a towering ancient tree, still in a state of shock. Oh damn it, luckily I ran fast. Otherwise, I would have lost my chastity if I were surrounded by those old women. After a pause, Wang Lu remembered something and couldn't help but shake his head. Poor Ping Shiwang. This time he will probably have to bear the blame until he dies. On the other side, the one who was even more exhausted was Wang Wu, who was leading her disciple through the heavy encirclement of Sky City. It's a mistake, a big mistake. Wang Wu looked distressed. I never thought that things would change like this. As the ancient sages said, life is like a pot of chowder. You never know what you will pick next. Damn it, you still have the face to talk? Such a strange chowder was made by Aya, right? Wang Lu scolded angrily. At the beginning, you strongly guaranteed that the Ask the Heaven tactic would win. Is this your unique way to win? I actually believed you at that time. I was also blind. Wang Wu knew that she was in the wrong and scratched her head in distress. This is really unexpected. In fact, there was no problem at the beginning. Who would have thought that after the arrival of heaven, it would cause serious damage to the structure of heavenly earth? Has it been confirmed that it's the problem of heaven? Otherwise, what else could it be? Wang Wu sighed and said, this is indeed my carelessness. After the problem of protecting the parents and the children, I should have thought that there would be such a change. The establishment of this tavern heaven on earth was based on a certain ancient earth immortal's unforgettable hatred for men. But after you showed a good man in front of him, this hatred had a crack, so the foundation of the whole tavern heaven on earth was shaken. You are really a scourge. Wang Lu rolled his eyes at her. Damn, according to what you said, I should have left you to protect the children without hesitation? Yes, if you didn't desperately pour your true energy into me, I wouldn't have to be so cautious when I changed my elixir. You're just causing trouble, okay? Just you wait, there will be a day when you regret it. Wang Wu sneered a few times, but suddenly felt a chill on her back. She didn't want to go further on this topic, so she changed the topic and said, in short, the problem is now in front of us. The chaos invasion, our previous plan, is basically completely invalid. We must find a new way out. What's more troublesome is that Yao and the others don't seem to have time to evacuate yet. They haven't evacuated yet? What happened? This time Wang Lu was also quite surprised. He thought that he would not have to worry about anything during the final battle of the succession ceremony, but unexpectedly this time it was simply shocking. If it was in normal times it would be fine, but the chaos invasion was a big battle that affected the whole world. Especially this time, looking at the purple fire that lit up the sky, it was clearly a big invasion that was rarely seen in thousands of years. It was unknown how many people would die in this heavenly earth to survive this disaster. Their cultivation was only around King Pill. It was really difficult to protect themselves in this chaotic world. It's not that easy to retreat. Wang Wu shook her head helplessly. The mechanism of the group of immortal tombs has changed a lot from the beginning. For such a large-scale immortal dreamland, it's not difficult for a cultivator to leave. However, if they want to leave after gaining something, they have to meet certain conditions and follow certain procedures. Generally speaking, a task will be arranged according to your performance in the immortal dreamland. The more the cause and effect involved, the more difficult the task will be. Previously, by ambushing a large group of Yuanying stage and even deity stage cultivators, they made a lot of money. Needless to say, if they want to withdraw smoothly, although it's not difficult to ascend to the sky, at least they have to spend a lot of effort. I've paid attention to it before. They have to visit a reclusive ascetic monk and complete her commission in order to find the way out of the mountains. However, in just a few days the chaos invasion happened, and the structure of the heavenly earth was turned upside down. According to the practice of the Temple of Heaven, once a large-scale war broke out, the temple would quickly summon all available forces, from the retired former high-ranking monks to the peddlers and pawns. Under this mobilization there was no exception. Therefore, any task line had to be broken. This kind of thing is not common. Wang Wu explained. This immortal dreamland is not for one or two cultivators to gain experiential learning. Usually, the more people who participate in the experiential learning, the more stable the structure of the immortal dreamland would be, and it would be difficult for the local turbulence to affect the overall situation. For example, if you take the task to leave a city, but the city is wiped out by a passing powerful person, what should you do? It doesn't matter, the world is so big, and there are many cities that can be used. You can just go to another city to pick up the task and leave. However, this time the chaos invasion is very vigorous. Those who don't gain much, such as the several little girls from Yin and Yang school, can mostly leave smoothly, but it's hard to say for others. And this time, in addition to our Lingjian school, there are quite a number of cultivators who have come in. I'm afraid the number is close to 100. So many. Actually, it's not that many. Because of our high level of strength, we feel that this heavenly earth is not big and can't accommodate many people. But for those little girls of Foundation Establishment and Shudan stage, the Palace of Heaven is enough for them to digest for a long time. And there are no less than 100 cities like the Palace of Heaven in the heavenly earth. TSK, this time the implications will be extensive. In case something happens to them, the aftermath will be troublesome. Wang Wu was not worried about this. It doesn't matter. As long as we don't admit it, no one will know that we did it. As long as they know that you and I were there when the accident happened, even a fool can guess that we did it. Then what do you think we should do? Do you still need to ask? Wang Lu said and looked up. It was obviously not noon yet, but the sky above their heads was already dim. Purple flames ignited the clouds and continued to spread. At the same time, if one listened carefully, they could clearly hear the cries of countless creatures in pain. The chaotic creatures and the human middle immortals were already at each other's throats. Those chaotic creatures, who had suffered for thousands of years in the lower realm, had endless killing intent towards the lofty heavenly earth. Once they met, they would fight to the death. Even if we don't care about the life and death of the other cultivators, if you and I want to leave this immortal dreamland, I'm afraid this is the only way. TSK. Help them fight against the chaotic invasion? Well, you dog chaotic creature, watch me take your dog life. Wang Wu disapproved of this and tried to stretch out her finger to flick Wang Lu's forehead out of boredom. Get lost. Wang Lu slapped away the claw that reached out and then said, actually, I have a vague idea now. It's about the entire immortal dreamland. You see, the head of the heavenly earth is a woman who hates men very much. So on the other hand, who is the one who commands the hundreds of millions of chaotic creatures in the lower realm? The human middle immortals worship the heaven. So do the chaotic creatures have their own religious beliefs? When Wang Wu heard this, she could not help but be startled, you think, thinking about the previous time when you and I joined forces to resist the heavenly thunder. Don't you think that the strength of the heaven seems to be a bit weak by the standard of the immortals? As the biggest background character, it seems to be incomplete. So we might as well speculate that half of the task in this immortal dreamland is below. Good fellow. After a long silence, Wang Wu softly said, your ability to open the hole in your brain is not bad. But I like it. If we want to play, let's play a bit bigger. Chapter 576. Phew, it's really an eye-opener, a hellish scene. Standing on the top of a dark and withered mountain, Wang Lu looked around and saw a dull and suffocating darkness shrouding the earth. Thousands of bottomless cracks cut the earth into countless isolated islands. The purple chaotic fire burned in the cracks, burning all the creatures that came close and cutting off the communication between the isolated islands. Looking up, the sky was completely covered by a dark barrier, without a trace of light. Instead, from time to time, stinking filth flowed down, further polluting this dark world. This was the chaotic world, a cursed world. Legend has it that after the establishment of the heavenly earth by heaven, it completely abandoned the chaotic world. This was the gathering place of all the evils in the world, and also the absolute forbidden place for the descendants of the human immortals. For thousands of years, there had never been a creature from the upper realm who entered this world. Even in the countless wars of resistance against the invasion, the cultivators of the heavenly earth only eliminated and expelled the chaotic creatures. They had never tried to counterattack the lower realm. However, at this time finally there were visitors from the upper realm. And this was the 5th day of the chaotic invasion war. 5 days ago, Wang Lu and Wang Wu successfully lured the high-ranking nun of the Temple of Heaven, Ping Shiwang, to sacrifice herself and launch the Ask the Heaven ritual. As a result, although the heaven successfully descended, it caused the structure of the heavenly earth to be unstable, and the barrier between the chaotic world and the chaotic world was broken. The chaotic creatures took advantage of this situation to launch an unprecedented invasion, and thus the bloody killing war began. Over the past 5 days, the heavenly earth had undergone earth-shaking changes. Because the barrier between the two worlds was completely destroyed, the scale of this invasion was unprecedented. The gap between the two worlds could appear in any corner of the heavenly earth, and the chaotic creatures could appear from anywhere. There was no way to stop them. The heavenly earth had no choice but to enter a state of total war. Thousands of cultivators were mobilized to join the battlefield, and the world was in chaos. In the turmoil, the experiential learning from 9 regions suffered heavy losses. Those shoot-on stage and foundation establishment stage cultivators even had an extravagant hope in such a battlefield. Some of them were decisive and knew how to cut their wrists and get out of here as soon as possible at all costs. However, there were also many people who wanted to cut their wrists but didn't know where to start. Fortunately, the people from Lingjian School were safe and sound in the chaos. Although the outbreak of the change was very sudden, Zhu Shiyao and the others had not had time to complete the exit procedure. However, after the outbreak of the war, Zhu Shiyao and the others, led by Moonless, immediately protected them in Moon Capital. Although the chaos invasion was cruel, Moon Capital was a heavy fortress that Moonless had carefully managed for many years. It was not so easy to fall. After experiencing several wars, it stood firm and seemed to be impregnable for a short period of time. After temporarily relieving her worries, Wang Wu took her disciple to make a risky move, taking an unconventional approach. They followed a passageway between the two worlds and arrived at the chaotic lower realm, witnessing the scenery of this world with their own eyes. Wang Wu was silent for a while and said, "No wonder the chaotic world hates tavern heaven on earth so much. This tavern heaven on earth is clearly using people sitting under their buttocks as a toilet. No one can stand it." Wang Lu deeply agreed, and at the same time, he secretly cursed that Dixian was simply a psychopath. At the beginning, when he saw the remains of the chaotic species in Moonless Moon Capital, Wang Lu was also surprised by the many ugly features of those chaotic species that were different from those of human beings. It was simply an encyclopedia of curiosity. At that time, he thought that these unique shapes and designs might be because the creator of this immortal dreamland had never really seen a man, but after hearing a lot of bad words about men, he could not help but have a lot of negative conjectures. Later, during the child bestowment ceremony, the extreme action of the heaven, which was almost brainless, seemed to confirm this point. Dixian had never seen a man, so he could not even give an accurate description of a man. But now, it seemed that those human-like chaotic species had simply mutated into a half-human half-ghost in an extremely harsh environment. No wonder when the chaotic species invaded the upper realm, they were filled with anger and madness. After being a cesspool for thousands of years, how could they not be angry? Wang Lu sighed and said, "After seeing the scene of the chaotic world with my own eyes, I admire these chaotic species even more. Such a harsh condition, but after thousands of years and countless generations, they have never given up their obsession. In this regard, they are much better than the seemingly advanced civilization of the heavenly earth." In his field of vision, he could clearly see many towers that ran through the sky. The base of the tower was usually erected on some large isolated islands, with a circumference of tens of miles. It was made of thick and solid boulders that piled up all the way up 300 feet, 3,000 feet, 30,000 feet. It pierced through the sky and reached the top of the sky just like a tower to the sky. Such a tower, even in the current 9 regions, could be called a small miracle. And in the chaotic world, there were no less than hundreds of small miracles. It was really unknown how many generations of efforts the chaotic species had to spend in order to complete such a feat in an extremely harsh environment. It's not the time to sigh with emotion. We've stayed here long enough, so let's get to work, Wang Wu said and patted Wang Lu's shoulder. Wang Lu understood and put his arm around his master's shoulder. The next moment, the scene in front of him suddenly became blurred, and the scenery continued to fly backward as fast as lightning. This was the first time Wang Lu personally experienced the speed of his master's full-strength flying sword. It was far faster than he imagined. In the past, on the non-phase peak, he always teased her about her non-phase method being the divine turtle method, and Wang Wu also admitted that her speed was her shortcoming. But today, it seemed that this shortcoming was only relative to her heaven-defying defense. Under the King Pill, no one could be as fast as her. Let alone the King Pill, even among the Taoist masters of Yuanying stage, there were only a few who could have such a speed, not to mention that Wang Wu was also carrying a person. Was this pair of King Pills so awesome? TSK, should he consider learning from her and using the second King Pill? However, the price of multiple King Pill was likely to be a lifetime of no hope of reaching Yuanying stage, which was not worth the loss. While he was thinking, Wang Wu had already brought him to the target. It was a giant with a height of more than 30 feet, covered with abscesses and tumors. On the left side of its body, there were 3 arms, but the length and size were not uniform. On the right side, there was only 1 arm, but it was so thick that it was completely out of coordination. Inside its body, there was an astonishing poison brewing. When the abscesses burst, the green thick liquid that flowed down could directly corrode the scorched ground. Based on his years of experiential learning, Wang Lu judged that this giant was at least close to the strength of a Taoist master of deity stage. At the same time, it was also a small leader in the chaotic world, which independently controlled a huge island and had hundreds of subordinates. Seeing the 2 people suddenly appearing, the abscess giant froze for a moment, and then the shortest and fastest arm on its left side waved, setting off a poisonous mist. But as soon as the poisonous mist spread, it was dispersed by a fierce sword wind. Wang Lu slowly retracted his trembling right hand and bared his teeth. With his current realm of King Pill, he used all his strength to blast out the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi with the sword of Mount Kuan. Because of this, his arm suffered a slight backlash, and the result was that he could barely disperse the poisonous mist of the abscess giant. Just now, after the sword chi broke through the poisonous mist, it hit the surface of the giant's body. The sharp sword chi that instinctively split mountains and split stones was completely absorbed by the sticky and elastic skin. These chaotic creatures that mutated from men were really awesome. This was just a small leader. When it came to a one-on-one fight, he was not its opponent. Fortunately, the main force that came to the chaotic world this time was another person. The abscess giant had quite a lot of weapons, and the left forearm was just one of the many weapons that were inconspicuous. He got serious. However, it was too late for him to show his serious appearance. This was because a hand had appeared above his head. It was a slender, white and soft palm. Wang Wu's right hand was not like the hand of a swordsman. There was no trace of a flaw in the palm, let alone a callus. Her skin was more delicate and smooth than any porcelain. But the power contained in this right hand could not be underestimated. Kneel down. Boom. The giant, who was 30 feet away, knelt down with a loud bang, and his heavy body even cracked the ground. Tell me, where is your leader? The question asked by Wang Wu was supposed to be a secret that the chaotic creatures wanted to keep even if they had to sacrifice their lives. But the abscess giant shook his body and completely succumbed to Wang Wu's will. His forearms pointed to one place, and his fingers bent down at the same time. Wang Wu looked around. The giant pointed to a blank space in the middle of countless islands, or rather it was pitch black. There seemed to be a huge hole there. The thick black formed a vortex swallowing everything close to it, and the bottom couldn't be seen. TSK, this immortal dreamland is really not creative. The leader of the upper realm is above the ninth heaven, and the leader of the lower realm is below the ninth hell. It seems that you really guessed it, these two are simply one. Wang Wu said and looked a little disappointed as she shook her head, but she was not in a hurry to go to the vortex. Because in this short confrontation with the abscess giant, it had completely alarmed the entire chaotic world. Wang Wu could see that from the countless islands around her, chaotic creatures of different shapes and forms rose into the air and rushed towards her. These chaotic creatures were a mix of fish and dragons. Most of them were just cannon fodder, but the number of strong ones was not small. If she relied on brute force, she would definitely be intercepted by them halfway, and then fall into the endless quagmire of war. No matter how powerful the double king pill was, it was impossible to be the enemy of a world. Therefore, Wang Wu was ready to change her path. Little Lu, let's go down there, hold me tight. As she spoke, she flew away. Her white dress was like a white lightning in the dark chaotic world. In the blink of an eye, she flew from the center of the island to the edge of the crack that separated the island. Then, under the astonished gaze of countless chaotic creatures, she jumped into the abyss. The next moment, a blazing purple flame spurted out from the abyss, completely submerging her and Wang Lu's figure. The chaotic creature stared dumbfoundedly at the purple chaotic flame that was burning more and more vigorously, as if igniting something flammable. In fact, whenever a powerful chaotic creature fell into the abyss for various reasons and was swallowed by the chaotic flame, such a scene would happen. And all those who dared to challenge the chaotic flame had never survived. The two invaders from the upper realm died just like that. At the same time, F***ck. It's so hot. Wrapped in the primal chaos flame, Wang Wu's non-phase sword defense was no longer in its perfect round shape. It was somewhat distorted and deformed by the high heat, and the edge of the sword defense was rubbed into an incandescent state by the strong energy impact. However, the sword defense eventually supported itself so that the two people inside the sword defense were not really ignited by the flame. Now we don't have to worry about being attacked by a group of chaotic creatures. The fear of the chaotic creatures of the abyss is deep in their bones, so no one dares to besiege us here, although the taste of being burned by the flame is not much better than being besieged. Wang Wu said and tried to fan the cold wind with her left hand. Wang Lu scolded, "If you have the leisure to act cute, why don't you hurry up and go to the whirlpool along this vein?" The chaotic world was divided by countless cracks, and from another perspective these countless cracks were like a dense network, extending in all directions. Of course, they also led to the whirlpool in the middle of the world. Chapter 577. Walking in the flame was a kind of romance. Wang Lu couldn't remember which immortal cultivation world senior had said so. It seemed that it was a peerless expert who grew up at the foot of a volcano and was born with fire spirit root. It was said that after his cultivation reached the Dashang stage, except for a few kinds of immortal world fire, no other kind of fire in 9 regions could hurt him. Ordinary high temperature would only help him restore his physical strength, and his favorite leisure activity was to bathe in the lava. That was the realm that countless cultivators of the 5 elements who specialized in fire were envious of. However, Wang Lu firmly believed that even if it was that senior who liked to make waves in the flame, if he was wrapped in the purple flame of the chaotic world, he would eventually die. This was a kind of extremely corrosive demonic fire. Hidden under the high temperature was a strong penetration that went straight to the heart. Wang Lu tried to put his perception out of the non-phase sword defense a little bit. As a result, it was captured by the flame in an instant. If he hadn't been prepared and cut off this part of his perception in time, the consequences would be unimaginable. This was not so much a fire but more like a kind of demon. The more he tasted the taste of this flame, the more he could realize its horror. At the same time, he could also feel how powerful Wang Wu was, who isolated the chaotic demonic fire with her own strength. It was no exaggeration to say that this was a kind of power that could destroy the cultivation theory system established in 9 regions for tens of thousands of years. In theory, it was impossible for a mere king pill realm to accommodate a great god like her. For thousands of years, talented cultivators emerged one after another, and there were countless experts who were far superior to their peers in the same stage. However, could anyone in the king pill realm wander in the chaotic fire? It was simply impossible. Thinking to this, Wang Lu could not help but remember that she used to boast shamelessly that from the body forging stage, foundation establishment stage, Shudan stage all the way to Mahayana stage was only one of the 3,000 ways to ascend to the immortal realm. Although it was now adopted by almost all the cultivators in 9 regions, it was by no means unique and irreplaceable. Now that he thought about it, it really didn't seem to be a boast. But then, Master, I have a problem in my heart that is difficult to solve. Wang Wu, while trying to support the sword defense, asked, "Do you wonder why I am so powerful?" "Haha, it's simple, it's because I'm a genius." Wang Lu immediately retracted his question and said disdainfully, "Genius my ass. It's not like I haven't seen your miserable face back then." She was born with a mixed spiritual root and cultivated to the point that she didn't even care about her female appearance. She could barely keep up with the tail end of the Golden Generation team. "You just inherited my inheritance, which is why you have such a foundation. What's more, you've been cultivating for more than 100 years since then. So it's not surprising that you have such achievements. What I want to ask is, have you been hiding something from me for so many years?" "Holy shit! You bastard, did you forget to inherit your conscience when you reincarnated? I don't remember you being so vicious back then. All these years I've endured all kinds of hardships to raise you, and you actually dare to question me for hiding it? Holy shit. You've suffered so much, but all you got was shit and piss." The two habitually fell into a quarrel, but the speed of Wang Wu's flying sword did not slow down at all. She zigzagged through the crisscross deep ravines, gradually closing the distance between them and the whirlpool. When they were hundreds of miles away from the whirlpool, they were finally discovered. Thereupon, from the surrounding islands, thousands of chaotic creatures of different shapes soared into the sky and surrounded them. These chaotic creatures were even larger than the abscess giant. Many of them were hard to imagine that they evolved from human beings and had completely lost their humanoid outline. However, without exception, they all had powerful strength. If surrounded by them, even the number 1 genius in 9 regions, King Pill would find it difficult to get away. Fortunately, the deterrent force of the chaotic creatures was too strong. Although they hovered in the sky and issued deterrent hisses from time to time, they did not dare to really dive down. They could only bombard the chaotic creatures with spells from a distance. However, when most of the spells approached the chaotic fire, they would be melted by the flame. A few of the spells with strong penetrating power, after being weakened by the flame, became insignificant. Wang Wu's non-phase sword defense was not afraid of group attack. Before the attack power reached a threshold, it was basically unbreakable. Moreover, even if something really happened, Wang Lu, the Peak King Pill, could also contribute some strength. Thus, the two of them finally approached the deep whirlpool with irresistible force. At this point, there were countless chaotic creatures hovering above their heads, blotting out the sky and covering the earth like a layer of dark clouds. Although they knew that they would not easily approach them, such a large number of them still secretly frightened them. At this point, even if the chaotic creatures did not approach them personally, their various long-range magical weapons were enough to give them a headache. However, perhaps because they were too close to the whirlpool, the chaotic creatures did not dare to act rashly. In addition to roaring angrily in the sky, there was no other superfluous action. Phew, it seems that I have chosen the right way. When they were about to enter the whirlpool, Wang Wu slowed down a bit, adjusted her breathing, and then repaired the distorted non-phase sword defense. However, from her pale face and trembling hands, it could be seen that she had reached her limit. After all, the double king pill is not omnipotent. Little Lu, I can only take you here. Wang Lu was surprised. Only here? What do you mean? You don't care about the rest of the way? I can't care about it. Don't forget that this whirlpool is the core of the chaotic world, equivalent to the heavenly earth's heaven. That's the realm above supreme. How could I care about it? Hey, you're known as the #1 king pill in 9 regions. Damn, you also know that I'm the king pill? When I become the #1 supreme in 9 regions, not to mention the whirlpool, even if it's the treasure house of Shangjing sect, I will take you there. Wang Wu said and then spat out a long mouthful of foul air. However, that breath clearly carried a bloody smell. Although this journey is a shortcut, it's also my current limit. If I go one step further, this non-phase sword defense will collapse. At that time, you and I will die in the chaotic demon fire, so you're just throwing caution to the wind? You can't even enter the #1 king pill in 9 regions, yet you want me to go there alone? Wang Lu said and then frowned. Do you know something else? I don't know. It's just that with the keen perception of a genius cultivator, I vaguely feel that there's something wrong here. I already felt it before I entered the chaotic world, and after I came here, the feeling was even more obvious. Wang Wu said and then pointed at Wang Lu's chest. Don't you think it's strange? This immortal dreamland is originally prepared for women. What's the matter with you coming in here? Wang Lu froze for a moment. He didn't expect her to repeat the same old topic. However, it seemed like she wouldn't deliberately talk nonsense at this time. Then, you mean someone in this immortal dreamland wants me to come in? Otherwise, there's no way to explain this. Before you, many sects have tried to send male cultivators in, but without exception, they all failed. Even a supreme-level cultivator couldn't help. Are you more special than a supreme-level cultivator? Upon hearing this, Wang Lu also understood. This also makes sense. Someone in this immortal dreamland wants to see me, but it's not in the heavenly earth. Because the high-level people in the heavenly earth have already met each other at the previous succession ceremony, but none of them knew me. Then the only possibility left is the chaotic world, and in the chaotic world, the whirlpool has the highest possibility. Yes, that's the case. Now that I've sent you to the door, do you dare to gamble? Although what Wang Wu said just now seemed reasonable on the whole, it was mostly subjective speculation, and there was basically no solid evidence. Based on this alone, to take the risk and go deep into the whirlpool required more than courage. However, Wang Lu believed it was true. He prepared a little bit in the shelter of the non-phase sword defense, adjusted his state to perfection, and then tried to go out of the sword defense. Outside the sword defense was the primal chaos demon fire, and because it was close to the whirlpool, the firepower was unprecedentedly fierce. With Wang Lu's current cultivation base, even if he fully used the non-phase method, he would not be able to hold on for more than a breath of time. Therefore, he simply gave up the non-phase method and stood on the edge of his master's sword defense. As soon as he made his move, a swift and fierce primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi went straight into the depths of the whirlpool. The penetrating power of the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi was unparalleled in the world. Even in the blazing flame, it was unimpeded all the way until it went deep into the unreachable depths. What is this? Wang Wu asked. To say hello, Wang Lu said. If there is really someone waiting for me down there. As a man, Wang Lu made an exception to enter the country of women. The biggest possibility was that someone deliberately wanted him to come in. Thinking about how he was attracted by a strong suction at the door, this seemed to be true. But why? Why him? There were countless special things about Wang Lu. Void spirit root, non-phase method, unparalleled king pill. However, there was only one possibility that could really attract the master of this immortal dreamland. It was the ancient demon sword inherited from Zhong Shangming, the tombkeeper of the group of immortal tombs. Sure enough, shortly after Wang Lu made his move, the whirlpool began to shake violently. That eternal inextinguishable fire cracked open a gap, which extended all the way to the front of Wang Lu, as if inviting him to go through. Wang Lu took a deep breath and then stepped out of Wang Wu's sword defense. There was a hand on his shoulder, and his master's voice rang in his ear. One last question. Wang Lu blurted out, loved. What I want to say is, if something happens to you, your inheritance will be mine. Wang Lu thought for a moment and realized that she was encouraging him in her own way. He could not help but laugh. Don't be silly, as early as 150 years ago, my inheritance was all given to you. With that, he took a step forward, and the moment his foot touched the path, his figure disappeared without a trace. Wang Wu watched him go away and didn't take back her eyes for a long time. Then she couldn't help but laugh. TSK, isn't this the husband stone? Chapter 578. Finally, I see you. In the dark, Wang Lu heard a woman's voice. Who are you? Oh, I am the master of the chaotic world. You can call me the source of chaos. No need to look for me, for the time being I am still invisible. In fact, it's better if you don't see me now. Wang Lu thought for a moment and said, Are you taking a bath? Ha ha. The woman's laughter in the dark was crisp and sweet, which had a soothing power. Although I'm not taking a bath, the situation is almost the same. It's not very good to see people. With that, the girl sighed and said, It's been many years. I finally see the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi again. Sure enough, it's you. Listening to her tone of being particularly familiar with primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi, Wang Lu immediately understood. Did you pull me in? Yes. The girl simply admitted. Because I really want to see the successor of Brother Ming. Moreover, I heard someone talk about you, so I'm even more interested. Brother Ming, someone talked about me? Wang Lu frowned upon hearing this. Are all of you still alive? That depends on how you define alive. The girl chuckled and said, When the group of immortal tombs was built, we really thought that we were dead. Resuscitation from the primal chaos was quite surprising. So they are the ghosts that have come back from the dead? Wang Lu said as his mind turned sharply. This group of Dixian ghosts seems to be dead but not dead, immortal for thousands of years. This was quite different from what he expected. At first, the opening of the group of immortal tombs was to excavate the Dixian heritage, not to invite those Dixian ghosts out. The present 9 regions was not the same as before the Age of Chaos. Right now, the level of Supreme was the #1 expert in 9 regions. The entire Wanxian League had at most dozens of them. Most of them were fake goods that forcibly reached the level of Supreme through various forbidden methods, and had no hope of ascending to immortality. There were even fewer true perfected monarchs. However, for this group of immortal tombs, the gatekeeper, ancient sword demon Zhong Shangming, had killed no less than 10 supreme-level cultivators in his life, which was simply not on the same level. If such a group of ascended experts were to come out, the 9 regions would be in chaos. Just as he was thinking about it, the girl's voice sounded again in the darkness. I called you here because I want to see Brother Ming's successor, and I also want you to do me a favor. Help? Wang Lu asked. Dixian is very resourceful. Why would he need my little king pill's help? It's precisely because you're so powerful that it's troublesome. The girl paused for a moment. That's why I need your help. Moreover, helping me is helping yourself. You must have a lot of questions about this group of immortal tombs in Dixian, right? Oh, I see. You're only answering my question because I helped you? Fair enough. In fact, unless you can help me, I can't tell you the answer even if I want to. My memory is not complete. There are many things in the past that I can't remember. However, the part that retains my memory is like fire and water. Moreover, her power is stronger than mine. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu was startled because the implication of the girl's words was, Do you have a split personality? You can barely say that. The me in the sky and the me on the ground, when they come together, it's a complete me. Unfortunately, right now they are opposing each other with equal harshness, wishing to tear each other into pieces. It's really sad. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu felt powerless. The one in the sky regarded all the men in the world as trash, and the one on the ground was not much better. After the chaotic creatures broke through the barrier of the heavenly earth, they went on a killing spree in the country of women. Their attitude toward women was like slaughtering pigs and dogs. Moreover, when they went down to the lower realm, they saw with their own eyes that the number of creatures in the chaotic world was far more than that in the heavenly earth. And this was not because of the diligent bestowing of children by the gods. On the isolated island in the chaotic world, there were a large number of flesh and blood nests, from which new chaotic creatures were born. Those flesh and blood nests were actually the women of the chaotic world. A long time ago, when the heavens ascended to the heavenly earth, other than a few human immortals who were lucky enough to survive, the rest were abandoned on this cursed land. There were males and females, among which the males mutated into demons and ghosts, while the fates of the females were extremely tragic. They were completely turned into reproduction machines, and after thousands of years of evolution, they even became nest-like buildings. Just that I don't understand one thing. To you, females should be the most hateful species, right? Heh, that's right, there isn't a single good thing in this world. Jealous, fickle, deceitful, vicious. Apart from giving birth, women are useless trash. Since you hate females to this extent, why do you have the image of a female? Don't you have any feelings for yourself? Just as Wang Lu finished his question, he heard a burst of crazy laughter. Ha 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 ha. Don't have any feelings for yourself? What do you know? Little fellow who thinks he's smart, the thing I hate the most in my life is this female body. Every time I think of myself as a female, I can't wait to end my own life. Then why don't you do it? I've already done it a long time ago. As he spoke, the surrounding darkness was suddenly lit up, turning into a vast expanse of white. Wang Lu narrowed his eyes and focused his gaze in front of him. In front of him was a lump of blurred flesh that was constantly trembling. It barely had the shape of a human, but it was completely unrecognizable. The surface of the flesh was covered with horrifying scars, cuts, burns, corrosion, and so on. This was the cruelest execution ground that Wang Lu had seen in his decades of life. The executioner, under the condition of ensuring that he would not die, imposed the greatest degree of pain and damage. In fact, for females, this ugly posture alone was already a great torture. The sweet voice just now was actually spitting out from a crack that was covered with bruises on the mass of flesh. Compared to the scene that ordinary people imagined of the cherry lips gently parting, it was really a world of difference. Seeing this scene, even Wang Lu had nothing to say. This Dixian with a split personality had really gone to the extreme on the path of perversion. Just based on gender discrimination alone, he did things so ruthlessly that he did not even let himself go. That's why I hope that you can help me end this split situation. The meatball-shaped girl sighed. As a split body, I can't completely control my hatred for females, but at the same time I also retain a trace of sobriety, so I can't completely agree with this deformed situation. Speaking of which, I actually envy the one in the sky. He can completely immerse himself in his own world and live a carefree life. What's the reason for this split? Wang Lu asked. It's a pity that I can't remember what happened in the past, but I must have experienced some serious stimulation. No one is born so perverted. This question is hard to say. There are also people who are born perverted. In short, how do you want me to help you? It's very simple. Show your best side to me in the sky. Show my best side? I in the sky firmly believe that there are no good men in the world, so I'll trouble you to play the role of a peerless good man to break her illusion, just like what you did in the choice to protect the big or the small. Wang Lu heard this and said curiously, there's no need to act as a peerless good man. I just need to show my true side. But are you sure this will work? Of course it will work. No one knows themselves better than themselves. Do you know, just your previous answer to protect the big or the small has greatly shaken me in the sky, so that the barrier of the entire heavenly earth to the lower realm has a flaw. And then you took advantage of it? You really know how to take advantage of it. This is very normal. Compared with me in the sky, me on the ground is the sober me. When the two need to be united, I will be the dominant party to really push the problem forward. Otherwise, are you going to pin your hopes on the heaven that knows nothing? Wang Lu smiled and didn't speak. With his habit, he wouldn't easily pin his hopes on anyone other than himself. The meatball in front of him said it nicely, but when she really swallowed the heaven, he didn't know what the result would be. Just as he was thinking, suddenly a cold voice interrupted. "Peerless good man? What a joke. You actually want to use a false proposition to knock me down? That's simply wishful thinking." Wang Lu was shocked when he heard this because this voice was not unfamiliar. Not long ago in the heavenly earth, it was this voice that sighed that there were still good men in the world. The heaven had arrived. A white-haired girl walked out of the white light. She was petite and slender, but her eyes flashed with lightning and her power was amazing. Wang Lu tried to size her up with his eyes. After a moment, he felt his eyeballs swollen and couldn't look directly. The other party obviously didn't pay attention to him, but a Dixian, even if it was split, its strong sense of existence was beyond the endurance of King Pill level. Wang Lu very wisely chose to temporarily avoid the sharp edge because at this time, there would naturally be others who couldn't help but jump out. "It's you." The voice of the source of chaos was cold. "You actually dare to come to my territory? Same to you. When you sent those filthy creatures to my territory, when were you ever courteous? I'm just giving and taking. Giving and taking. What a joke. Since you're here, do you still want to leave? If I want to leave, you can't stop me. No matter how clear-headed you are, in terms of strength, I'm stronger than you. Then are you here to crush me with your powerful strength? No, I'm here to make a bet with you." The girl said and sneered. "I'm tired of the tug-of-war with you. Don't you want to use the peerless good man to disintegrate me? Then come and try, I'll give you this chance. But if you can't do it..." "Humph, if I can't do it, I'm at your disposal." The split two quickly reached an agreement. The problem was, have you not considered asking for my opinion? Chapter 579. The arrival of heaven was not surprising. Although she had been living in seclusion behind the scenes for thousands of years, and even made her people mistakenly think that the so-called heaven was just an impersonal law, she was not cold-blooded after all. She could not be so heartless and treat all living things as dogs. Therefore, she could not sit back and watch the destruction of the tavern heaven on earth. Before descending to the mortal world, the situation of the war between the two worlds that Wang Lu saw was basically one-sided. The tavern heaven on earth was defeated in front of the chaotic army, and could not withstand a single blow. In the past wars, the victory of the tavern heaven on earth did not rely on its own strength. The existence of the barrier between the two worlds made every invasion of the mortal world could only advance along a narrow passage. In addition to being able to occupy some territories by surprise at the beginning, once the tavern heaven on earth reacted, the army would press the border, and the chaotic creatures would soon be defeated because of the narrow supply line. Even so, in every war, the tavern heaven on earth would suffer heavy losses, and the gap between the combat effectiveness of the two sides could be seen. After all, the girls of the tavern heaven on earth were enjoying life leisurely, while the chaotic world was a group of deformed creatures born to destroy. At the same time, the reproduction of the tavern heaven on earth could only rely on the children bestowed by heaven. The efficiency was limited, so the population was not large. The number of chaotic creatures was not limited at all. It had been expanding at an alarming rate for thousands of years. If they were not under the control of the source of chaos from time to kill each other by refining poisonous insects, it would have been innumerable. The invasion of the mortal world this time was based on the wavering position of heaven, and the foundation of the barrier between the two worlds was greatly weakened. The hundreds of Babel towers in the chaotic world immediately drilled through hundreds of passages between the two worlds, and the number of Babel towers was still increasing. The chaotic army of the mortal world blossomed in the tavern heaven on earth, and the female cultivators were unable to stop the expansion of the opponent. In the case that the quantity and quality were inferior to the opponent, being able to preserve the effective strength for a short time was the limit. Before Wang Lu came to the mortal world, the tavern heaven on earth had completely retreated in several fortresses. Among them, Moon Capital was one of the core fortresses. Under the arrangement of Moonless, Zhu Shiryao and others had to kill thousands of chaotic creatures every day, which was very enjoyable. But this was only because the most powerful chaotic kings in the chaotic world had not yet taken action. The passage between the two worlds could not accommodate them. If the situation of the battle continued, the passageway would continue to expand. By then, it would only be a matter of time before the entire army of Tavern Heaven on Earth was annihilated. Therefore, as expected, Heaven chose to descend to the mortal realm. Of course, she could choose to reveal her true form and sweep across chaos on Earth. However, it was naturally not as satisfying as directly attacking the root of the problem if she had to fight an endless stream of chaotic creatures. It was just that Wang Lu didn't expect that the duel between the two leaders would turn out to be in such a ridiculous form. Did you guys ask for my opinion before using me as a prop for the competition? The source of chaos asked curiously, now that our interests are aligned, and this method is undoubtedly the most efficient. What do you think? Chang Tian sneered. What else could it be? It was nothing more than a lack of confidence in himself. Peerless man? This in itself was a false proposition. How can there be anything good in this world? Wang Lu was amused. That's not what you said at the child bestowment ceremony a few days ago. That's because I misjudged. Protecting the adult but not the child was not because you respected women. It was purely because the child was a girl. You're just abandoning a baby. Regarding this logic, Wang Lu deeply admired it. Because her logic was not wrong. The heaven would always bestow a child to a girl. Therefore, protecting the adult and not the child could not explain the problem at all. From another point of view, Wang Lu's choice was no different from abandoning a baby girl, which was also the most hated thing by feminists. However, this piqued Wang Lu's interest. Initially, he had no interest in such a childish method, especially when it came to deciding the winner with a peerless man. It made him feel like a bird being pushed out to flirt in front of a rich woman. However, it was different now. This heaven was so stubborn that it made Wang Lu's fighting spirit rise. He did not doubt whether he was considered a peerless man at all. The only question was whether he could prove it to heaven. For a person with deep-rooted beliefs, it was as difficult as ascending to heaven to overthrow her. Especially since this duel was a matter of life and death for heaven and the origin of chaos, she could not admit defeat so easily. Just like the previous issue of protecting the adult or the child, she had originally admitted to it, but now she changed her words and accused Wang Lu of abandoning a baby. She was basically lying to herself. However, this also made her almost invincible. After all, as the saying went, no one could wake up a person who was pretending to be asleep. Coincidentally, Wang Lu was interested in trying to wake the person who was pretending to be asleep. Wang Lu sneered. You're right, I really have no confidence in this bet. Before heaven could mock him, Wang Lu said, because I have no confidence in you women. Stubborn, self-deceiving. No one would sit at the same table with such a person. You can't afford to lose. Ha ha ha. The origin of chaos shrieked. You're right, there's no such thing as a good woman. What a joke. Heaven trembled in anger. Can't afford to lose? Alright, I'll give you a chance. As long as you can fulfill my conditions, no matter what despicable methods you use, I'll admit defeat immediately without a second word. How about it, do you dare to accept it? Wang Lu only smiled faintly. Admit defeat immediately without a second word? It sounded nice, but what would happen if they really turned against each other when the time came? Now that the upper and lower realms were mortal enemies, any method was allowed to win, so what was the point of lying? Besides, as long as the conditions were fulfilled, who knew what she would ask for? If she asked Wang Lu to castrate himself and become a woman to prove that he did not discriminate against women, would Wang Lu have to do as she said and become a celestial fairy? You don't have to worry about that. The origin of chaos said, as long as I'm here, she can't deny it. Moreover, the current split is largely based on the absolute confidence of both sides in their own ideas. Once you can really break her confidence, she won't be able to deceive herself even if she wants to. Previously, the problem of protecting the big and the small has already shaken the barrier between the two realms. Of course, it will be very difficult to break her belief. She will certainly put forward very difficult conditions, so you have to be mentally prepared. Heaven sneered. Yes, my conditions are as difficult as ascending to heaven for a man. But don't worry, I won't deliberately make things difficult for you with irrelevant problems, because that would be tantamount to declaring that I have no confidence in my own persistence. I see. Then I have no more questions. Just bring it on. As soon as Wang Lu's voice fell, his complexion changed. Because in front of him, there were suddenly a few more figures, and each of them looked very familiar. Zhu Shiyao Lu Li Lady Boss by Shixian Yu Xiniao Catgirl Ling Yan. Each of them was in a trance as if they had fallen into an illusion. Just when Wang Lu thought that heaven was going to threaten him with hostages, he saw the last person. It was his master, who was waving at him. What are you doing here? The others were fine. They were originally taking refuge in Moon Capital and Tavern Heaven on Earth, and tried to complete the mission by farming chaotic monsters. So it was not surprising that they could be captured by Heaven at any time. But what was Wang Wu doing here? Wang Lu did not believe that she would be captured by Heaven. She might not be able to defeat Heaven, but she definitely had the ability to protect herself. Haha, I'm here to help. Wang Wu giggled. Just now, Heaven separated a trace of primordial spirit to communicate with me, and told me about her plan. I thought it was very interesting, so I came to cooperate. You're really... Wang Lu was so angry that he could not speak. Looking at Wang Wu's expression as if she was watching a good show, he almost broke his teeth from gritting them. Darling, don't be angry, moi. Moi my ass. You're already so old and you're still trying to act cute? Don't you have any shame? Wang Lu's primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi immediately brewed in his hand. But at the same time, Heaven let out a sneer. Vulgar and rude words to women, blindly using violence to oppress people. Humph, this is indeed the style of you men. Wang Lu turned his head to look at Heaven and said coldly, believe me, you'll regret putting that guy in your female camp. With that, he let out a long sigh. What conditions do you have? Just say it. It's very simple. Next, as long as you don't hurt anyone here, I'll let you pass. Don't hurt anyone here? Wang Lu frowned, thinking, what kind of condition is this? Not to mention Lu Li and Bai Shixian, these well-behaved children, even if it was his big senior sister and the dumb cat who he had a shallow relationship with, he would not hurt them for no reason. Or would Heaven manipulate them to attack him, in order to test his tolerance for women? That didn't matter. With his non-phase sword defense, these people together would not be his opponent. Wait a minute. Among these people, there seemed to be a person whom he could not wait to kill right now. Others were fine, but for Wang Wu, this peerless slut, it was really difficult to restrain himself from hurting her. This Heaven had really put forward a tricky condition. However, since he had already come this far, how could he back down? Okay, then let's begin. When Wang Lu finished speaking, he saw Heaven and the source of chaos looked at each other and exchanged the terms of the bet. Then the pale world in front of him suddenly disappeared and was replaced by a broken scene. The fragments of the scene were glued together at a very fast speed. In the blink of an eye, Wang Lu was already in a magnificent palace. He sat on a large bed. The red and white robe that he usually wore was replaced by a pure white exquisite pajamas. Beside the bed, a delicate girl was presenting a plate. On the plate were several wooden signs, on which were the names of Lu Li and the others. Then Wang Lu heard a sentence that made his hair stand on end. Your Majesty, whose sign are you going to flip tonight? Chapter 580. Wang Lu hadn't felt such a strong sense of fear for a long time. Long before he climbed the Spirit Sword Mountain to seek immortality, in the Wang family village, he was already famous for being fearless. The word fear seemed to be insulated from him. At any time, he would always have a well-thought-out plan. So much so that after more than 20 years of his debut and countless miraculous achievements, some people began to have superstition about him, as if he was really omnipotent and fearless. In fact, this was simply nonsense. Fear was the instinctive reaction of creatures to seek benefits and avoid harm. Except for those with incomplete brain structure, who could be fearless? Moreover, one of the most important qualities on the road of immortal cultivation was fear. Fear the heaven and earth, fear the great Tao, and fear the words of the sages. The truly fearless people were those who were possessed by the devil. Therefore, Wang Lu only felt justified in his current strong fear. If it was anyone else, seeing the plate with the name Wang Wu on it, perhaps they would be frightened. Your Majesty, whose card are you going to flip today? The delicate maid asked in a hurried manner. Wang Lu was silent. He didn't want to flip the plate now, he just wanted to flip the plate. This heaven's bad taste could be called vicious. The dignified Dixian actually made this kind of palace fight-themed story. However, judging from her twisted and split personality, perhaps she really experienced a palace fight and then became a loser. Thus, in her extremely lost heart, two thoughts sprouted. One was that all the men in the world were not good things. This was because of the resentment of falling out of favor. The other was that all the women in the world were not good things. This was an unforgettable hatred for her peers. However, the love story of Dixian was not the focus. Right now, he had to take care of his own business. Right now, he was in a strange place. Everything around him was like a dream, fake and real. The rules of this gambling fight were not clear enough. For example, how long was the time limit to not hurt anyone? What was the definition of hurt? These were not clear. Then the first thing to do. Wang Lu looked up and said to the maid, "Help me call all the concubines here. I want to hold a special meeting to discuss it." What? The maid looked at Wang Lu incredulously. All the concubines? Yes, call all of them. This is against the rules. In the harem, there can only be one consort at a time. You're comparing me to those mediocre people. One concubine isn't enough. I'm big and I can fight 10 at once. Your Majesty, you can't do that. The maid anxiously advised. How can you have such a ridiculous idea? This will cause chaos in the harem. I like messy ones. It's okay. The maid knelt on the ground with a thud. Your Majesty, you mustn't. Seeing that the little girl was determined, Wang Lu frowned and decided not to force her. Then, he tried to use his primordial spirit to call out to her, but found that many immortal spells were useless in this palace. Therefore, he realized that heaven had intentionally cut off his connection with the others when he designed the scene. That's right, they're all from the same family. If they colluded to put on a show, wouldn't this bet be a sure win? In that case, it was probably impossible for them to sleep together. After a long time, Wang Lu summoned the kneeling maid and softly asked, "In your opinion?" Upon hearing this, the maid was startled and somewhat incredulously looked at Wang Lu. "Your Majesty, how could it be my turn to express my opinion on this kind of thing? This maid is ignorant if I say something wrong. It's okay, just think of it as eliminating the wrong answer for me. Tell me first." The maid suddenly looked embarrassed as if she was about to cry, and her arm that was holding the plate trembled. Wang Lu scanned her with his primordial spirit, and found that she was just a little cultivator with a cultivation base of foundation establishment stage. No wonder she couldn't resist his gaze. However, since she could personally serve the emperor, how could her status be low? Therefore, he continued to ask, "In your opinion, what if I choose this card?" Wang Lu pointed to Lu Li's card. The maid froze for a moment, wanting to say something but hesitated. "If you have something to say, say it, or I'll flip your card." As he spoke, Wang Lu deliberately licked his lips with his tongue and rolled up his sleeves, scaring the maid so much that her face turned pale. Your Majesty's choice of Lady Lu Li is naturally excellent. And then, Wang Lu could tell that she hadn't finished her sentence. But you've already flipped Consort Lu Li's card many times recently. If you continue, this servant is worried that the other consorts will have something to say. Wang Lu's heart skipped a beat. Had she flipped Xiao Liuli's card many times recently? I don't have any recollection of it. Although he knew that this was just a background setting given by the heavens, there was a subtle hint of an emerald crown in this setting. However, from another point of view, this setting was reasonable. If there really was such a harem, Lu Li must be one of the most popular concubines. Figure and appearance were secondary. In terms of appearance, Zhu Shiyao by Shixian, and even the silent Wang Wu, none of them lost to her. However, Lu Li's character was too inexplicable. Naive, well-behaved and clingy, a perfect harem concubine. If there really was such a harem, Wang Lu asked himself, he would flip Xiao Liuli's card every day until it was rotten. However, on the other hand, as the saying goes, the tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. Lu Li's exclusive favor in the harem would inevitably become the target of public criticism. Moreover, even without considering the harem infighting, just by looking at the condition given by the heavens, not to hurt any of the girls, it was impossible to let one person exclusive favor, because it would inevitably make other people fall out of favor and be hurt. Wait a minute, there seemed to be something wrong with this logic. The setting of this scene by the heavens implied an important premise. Those who were set as concubines by her must have feelings for him. Only then would this setting be meaningful. The problem was that this was not in line with reality at all. Well, Yuxinyao was certainly an exception. He didn't know what was wrong with this child. But after several contacts more than 10 years ago, she had a deep love for him. Fatty Wen's efforts for so long still couldn't change her mind. Of course, this matter was purely the fatty seeking his own death. In the beginning, he enthusiastically attacked, plus he really didn't have any other thoughts about Yuxinyao, so Yuxinyao's attitude was vaguely loosened. If the fatty took advantage of this situation to pursue her, he would have a great chance to take her down, but as a result, the fatty worked hard and easily took down the great Ming country's Miss Li Nana. Moreover, he achieved the shocking achievement of getting pregnant before marriage. Since then, he indeed lived a blissful sexual life, but he also completely lost his future with Yuxinyao. In addition to Yuxinyao, Wang Wu could barely be regarded as an example. Although the relationship between the two had a comical trend, it was difficult to sort out the 100 years of love between the past and present life. But apart from these two, Wang Lu really didn't think that there was anyone else who would care about his love. Little Lu Li had indeed always been very close to him, but to say that the love between a man and a woman seemed to be a bit lacking. Bai Shixian, as the descendant of the Grand Cloud Fairy, had an inextricable fate with him, but it was difficult to classify it as a love between a man and a woman. In addition, the lady boss and the cat girl Ling Yin only had a friendship, not a love affair. As for Big Marshall's sister Zhu Shiyao, even their friendship was relatively shallow. Under this premise, it didn't matter even if he didn't touch those people's cards for 10,000 years. The key point of this test seemed to be a problem from the beginning. Thinking of this, Wang Lu tentatively asked, "As far as I know, Zhu Shiyao has always been focused on swordsmanship, so she shouldn't care, right?" The maid carefully replied, "Zhu Nyongyang's character is indeed indifferent, and she doesn't easily associate with others, but Zhu Nyongyang's desire for your majesty's favor is no weaker than anyone else's." Wang Lu thought, isn't this nonsense? With Zhu Shiyao's temperament, whose favor would she care about? Right now, it was only her master, sect head Feng Yin's words that were more useful. If he was a true immortal of swordsmanship, then so be it. As long as he could teach her an unprecedented set of divine swordsmanship, she certainly wouldn't mind selling her own body, even if she was played with by others in all kinds of ways. But the problem was, purely in terms of swordsmanship, Zhu Shiyao was still above him. Seeing that Wang Lu didn't believe her, the maid hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, please don't doubt Zhu Nyongyang's true feelings for you. She entrusted her swordsmanship to you because she was usually lonely in her boudoir. In Zhu Nyongyang's heart, there is absolutely no one more important than your Majesty." Wang Lu's teeth were about to fall off when he heard this, but on second thought, this kind of setting was actually more in line with the needs of the game. The problem was, this was equivalent to Zhu Shiyao's worldview being forcefully changed and her brain being forcefully washed. This might not be a good thing for a cultivator's primordial spirit. "Then the others are the same?" the maid boldly replied. "Although each of the consorts has a different temperament, their true feelings for you are definitely not false." "Is it the same for Wang Wu? She has gone through thick and thin with you for many years, and their relationship is the deepest. Why do you doubt her?" After hearing this, Wang Lu fell silent again, but very quickly, an idea flashed through his mind. Through thick and thin with her for many years? Take out the records of me flipping the tiles in the past for reference. Since this setting had a long history, then it would be safe as long as he followed the records of flipping tiles in the past few years. The maid said in surprise, "Now that the imperial harem has just been built, the system of flipping tiles has only been implemented a few days ago. These days you've been flipping consort Lu Li's tiles, so why would you need any records?" TSK, as expected of Dixian, he's really meticulous in doing things, not giving people any chance to play tricks. If that's the case, then there's no other way. Wang Lu shook his head, reached into the plate, and lifted up a wooden tile. The maid looked at the tile and smiled slightly. "I'll go call Consort Wu now." Chapter 581. Ha ha ha, little Lulu. I'm here to play with you. Before the person arrived, the laughter came first, and a cheerful atmosphere hit him like a wave of heat. However, when Wang Lu heard the laughter, he felt a throbbing pain in his heart, and he felt like he could die at any time. He didn't flip over Wang Wu's sign to have sex with her. Now that he was in a scene set by heaven, no matter how elegant Wang Lu was, he couldn't do it in front of others. He looked for Wang Wu to discuss countermeasures. Although his solo ability as a professional adventurer was heaven-defying, the current problem wasn't something that could be solved by one person, especially in the face of too many unknown factors. Wang Lu naturally thought of asking for help from his teammates. Although Wang Lu didn't want to admit it, there was no doubt that Wang Wu was the most trustworthy among them. Whether it was strength or intelligence, she was the best. However, when he heard the laughter full of schadenfreude, Wang Lu felt that he had chosen the wrong person. Wang Wu might be smart and strong enough, but when she was playing tricks on him, her intelligence and strength would add fuel to the fire. And right now she looked like she was playing tricks on him. So when Wang Wu jumped into the room happily, Wang Lu could only look at her with an incomparably conflicted gaze. And then he tried to suppress the surging regret in his heart. Who asked you to be impulsive to flip over her sign? If you flip it again, I'll chop off my hand. Before he could speak, he heard Wang Wu laugh and say, "Haha, why do you have such a withered face the moment we meet? Could it be that you can't do it at such a young age? That's really tragic. Why don't you switch from attacking to receiving and enjoy a different kind of pleasure?" Wang Lu was silent for a long time, and then he resolutely raised his middle finger at her. "Haha, are you using this finger to hint at the size? F***ck. If you talk nonsense again, I'll burn your sign, confiscate all the sticks in your palace, and prohibit you from providing cucumbers, eggplants, and other vegetables. You won't be satisfied for the rest of your life." Okay, let's get down to business. Seeing how fierce Wang Lu's retaliation against the flirting tactic was, Wang Wu shrugged and stopped smiling. At the same time, Wang Lu's anger dissipated and he asked, "What do you think of the current situation? How else can I look at it?" Wang Wu said as she walked closer and opened her palm. "Let's not talk about anything else. Give me the red heart first." Wang Lu was stunned. "What heart? You don't know? Is there no one to explain it to you?" Wang Wu was also curious. "It's the red heart that symbolizes the favor of the harem. You should have 3 of them now." Wang Lu was stunned for a moment. He turned around and took out 3 heart-shaped rubies from the pillow beside the bed. "You mean these?" "That's right. Give them all to me." Wang Wu reached out and wanted to take them, but Wang Lu naturally wouldn't give it to her. "First, tell me what these are. You're really troublesome. Don't you understand the function of these things? Each one symbolizes the favor of the harem. It's a necessity for the harem concubines." "A necessity?" Wang Lu carefully observed the ruby in his hand. He felt that it seemed to contain some mysterious power. If he could analyze it, I advise you not to try it. That gem is a Dixian trick. It's not that easy to crack. It will only bring you unnecessary trouble." Wang Wu warned sternly. Then she explained, "Simply put, the rules of this game revolve around the ruby. As the concubines, we have to consume 1 ruby every day. If we don't, we will be punished. If we accumulate 3 days of punishment, we will be eliminated. Wait, including you, there are 7 people playing the role of the harem. That means we have to consume 7 rubies every day, but I only have 3 gems here." "That's right, only 3, and only 3 will be automatically generated every day. That's the problem." Wang Wu said, "Not only that, but what's more troublesome is that for us, 1 gem is only the lowest consumption. If we want to end this game, we have to accumulate 3 gems on our own. 1 for each person isn't even enough. How can we accumulate it?" Wang Lu frowned. He gradually figured out the difficulty of this round. This Dixian was really vicious. He suddenly gave them a completely unsolvable problem. Moreover, the problem was open and aboveboard. It was obvious that he was making things difficult for them. Anyone with basic mathematical ability could calculate that no matter how they planned, the ruby was definitely not enough. The happiness of a few was bound to be built on the pain of the majority. Based on the calculation of sending 1 person away with 3 gems, even without considering the daily consumption, all 7 of them would need 21 gems. This was Wang Lu's weekly output. This meant that the last person to leave would have to suffer for 6 days. Needless to say, it was not feasible. This problem is really a pain in the ass. Wang Lu sighed. The design of the harem is to value men over women. The emperor of the world has 3,000 beauties in his harem, but some of them can't get the emperor's love in their entire lives. This is an unsolvable problem. What's more, the harem has always been sinister. There are no good men or women. Only she could think of finding the beauty of love between men and women here. Is that so? I don't think her logic is difficult to understand. Wang Wu said, for you men, the highest ideal in life is nothing more than to be a king. The mortal world has a mortal emperor, and the cultivators have a cultivator leader. Even in the immortal land of the upper realm, there are most likely immortal kings and immortal emperors. So, arranging for you to be an emperor is to make you the best man in the world. If even the best man can't prove that he is a good thing, then naturally there are no good men in the world. This logic is also powerful. Because this logic is not wrong. Wang Wu laughed. You think that the body of an emperor has too many beauties in the harem, and it is difficult to coordinate. If it were a disabled person who was born with a mental disability, he would indeed not have to worry about the affairs between men and women for the rest of his life, nor would he hurt the hearts of any girls because of it. But is it possible that a mentally disabled person is a good man? Haha. Wang Lu could not help but laugh. So that's how it is. That makes sense. I think that the Dixian girl fell in love with a hero, or at least in her opinion a heroic emperor. Unfortunately, her heart was broken by that person, so she thought that even the great hero she loved could hurt her, let alone other men. With that, Wang Lu's smile faded. Unfortunately, it's meaningless to understand this. Right now the problem can't be solved. The number of rubies is definitely not enough, not even half of the daily consumption. Wang Wu said, that's right, but as the saying goes, it's better to break 1 finger than to injure 10 fingers. Since it's impossible to divide evenly, why don't you give me all 3 gems in exchange for my freedom? What do you think? Wang Lu gave a very sincere answer. Wang Wu sighed. To be honest, there's really no good way. I woke up earlier than you guys in this world, so I have seen the layout here in advance. Dixian's means are extraordinary, so it's very difficult to use tricks. What about using non-phase method to meet force with force? It's best not to try. Although that Dixian said that it doesn't matter what trick you use, it only means that she doesn't mind if you cheat on the gambling table. But if you use force to solve it, that's the same as flipping the table. And you and I are not qualified to flip the table of a Dixian. Don't forget, there are more than 2 of us at the table. TSK so troublesome. Wang Lu frowned and fell into contemplation. Wang Wu didn't speak, nor did she disturb him. She just kept looking at the gem in Wang Lu's hand, as if planning when to snatch it. After an unknown period of time, Wang Lu suddenly opened his mouth. Actually, this matter boils down to a problem of increasing income and reducing expenditure. I haven't thought about how to reduce expenditure, so I might as well do something from the source of income. For example, Wang Lu said, clenched his teeth and made up his mind. He then took out a pink porcelain bottle from his mustard seed bag, poured out 2 blue pills and swallowed them. The next moment, Wang Lu felt as if a fire was ignited in his body. It was not an ordinary fire, but a demonic fire that could make people's blood boil and reason hazy. After this flame entered his mouth, it hovered in his stomach for a moment, then quickly turned down and gradually concentrated in the lower abdomen. Soon, Wang Lu was glad that he had changed into a loose robe before summoning Wang Wu. Right now, with the correct sitting posture, he barely covered his sky pillar, so as not to make a fool of himself. It was just that, even the non-phase golden body couldn't suppress his flushed face. How could he hide it from Wang Wu? Little Lu, you're not really going to fail at such a young age, are you? You actually have to rely on drugs to maintain your dignity? However, from the angle of your current body and the angle of the cover of the robe, your capital is quite good. Before she finished speaking, she widened her eyes and looked incredulously at the ruby next to Wang Lu's pillow. This is also possible? Wang Lu breathed a sigh of relief. Sure enough. Although the design of the rules of this world is absurd, in fact, every detail has its own meaning and the possibility of further extension. For example, this ruby, since it symbolizes the emperor's favor, then if the emperor can dig deeper into his own potential and divide more love, there should be more gems formed. In fact, I suspect that this is the real intention of Dixian to design this scene. Oh, Wang Lu sneered and said, she wants to know if I, Wang, have the ability to dig out enough potential to give happiness to every woman. Hey, she really underestimated me. If there were really 3,000 beauties in the harem, I might be helpless, but it's just 7 people, it's not even worth mentioning. Wang Lu said passionately, then wiped away the blood that kept gushing out of his nose, and poured all the pills in the pink porcelain bottle into his mouth. The next moment, a fountain of blood shot up into the sky, and Wang Lu fell backward. Before fainting, he vaguely saw a red light flashing next to his pillow. Haha, it really worked. Chapter 582. When he woke up, Wang Lu found that he was still in that damned palace, and in front of him was that face that made people feel pain in the ass. How come it's you? Wang Wu said angrily, who else could it be? Do you really think you're an emperor and expect a group of maids to serve you? They're just a group of background characters who can't even explain the rules of the game to you. Apart from me, the master who raised you, who else do you expect to wipe the blood from your nose at the critical moment? With that, Wang Wu flung her hand and threw a piece of blood-stained rag into the bucket. Wang Lu frowned. From the color of the rag, he felt that the amount of blood was a bit too much. The entire bucket was dyed red. And with Sister Wu's usual integrity, it was hard to say that she didn't forge it with some kind of method to prove how conscientiously she served him. Maybe it was just her leftover feminine products. But now was not the time to care about these trivial matters. Where are the rubies? Gone. Wang Wu shrugged. Gone. How come? Although Wang Lu's first reaction was that Wang Wu ate all the rubies, logically speaking, there were about 10 rubies that appeared beside the pillow at the last moment. There was no need for Wang Wu to swallow all the rubies, of course. He couldn't rule out the possibility that she hoarded them and sold them to Zhu Shiryao and the others at a high price. But for the sake of their relationship, he didn't think too much of her and listened to her explanation first. However, Wang Wu only looked at Wang Lu coldly and said, I guess you must be suspecting that I stole the rubies and hoarded them. Wang Lu sighed. If it were you, wouldn't you be suspicious? Humph, I did want to take a few rubies to play with, but as soon as I stretched out my hand, those rubies disappeared. Disappeared? That's right, but I'm not surprised. In fact, from the moment those gems were formed, I could tell that they were very unstable. Not only were there many flaws in their structure, but their luster was also unstable. Wang Wu sighed and said with some regret, it seems that opportunistic is not the right way after all. However, this actually makes sense. The ruby symbolizes your love for your concubine. And this kind of love should emphasize sincerity, rather than sensual desire. When you first took the aphrodisiac to tap your potential, it could be understood as sacrificing yourself to satisfy others, which was a noble act. However, later on, when you ate the aphrodisiac as if it was a meal, it was completely opportunistic. By extension, it could be classified as sensual desire, and it could not be counted. Wang Lu frowned. He felt that this made sense. However, many of his plans could not be carried out in this way. Actually, I'm quite curious as to why you chose to take medicine just now. Wang Wu said, if you think that being pampered is equivalent to being blessed, and the current problem is that you don't have enough capital, then you should make full use of the power of props. You can go to the kitchen and get a few cucumbers. Wouldn't you get as many gems as you want? Isn't that nonsense? The cucumbers are too insincere. Wang Wu sneered. That's because the way you use it is wrong. You're a sword cultivator. What do you think the immortal sword cultivator is? Ha ha ha, I want to ask you, what do you think the immortal sword cultivator is? You know, my non-phase sword has more than 110 layers of heaven, but you only... Enough, this topic ends here. Wang Lu quickly stopped this wave of insulting the dignity of the immortal path. Wang Wu smiled and then sighed with emotion. In short, since you can't solve the problem by taking medicine, it seems that there's really no chance. The rules of this game are watertight. I think you should just admit defeat. Wang Lu shook his head. Of course, he didn't want to admit defeat. Not to mention whether Dixian could accept it or not. Wang Lu himself never had the habit of running away halfway. However, the rules of this game were really a pain in the ass. 3 hearts, 7 women, and no tricks were allowed. This was simply an unsolvable problem. However, on second thought, an idea flashed through Wang Lu's mind. This rule of having to pay with sincerity and no tricks was actually secretly providing an opportunity. If rubies don't count for whether or not I'm sincere, does that mean that I can think of things the other way around? The so-called rubies are just the general equivalent of the act of spoiling. When the number of rubies is insufficient, I can use my true feelings as a substitute. If I pay enough sincerity to Lioli and the others, and they can also get happiness from it, can they also meet the conditions of clearing the game? The more Wang Lu thought about it, the more reasonable it was. It should be like this. The setting of the rubies is very abrupt. Isn't it ridiculous to use the rubies to replace the human heart? In the end, what Dixian values is the human heart. The setting of these 3 rubies seems to be a convenient prop to reduce the difficulty of the game. When you really can't pay your sincerity to someone, you can use the rubies instead. Well, if that's the case, it seems to make sense in theory. The rubies in this world should just be a symbol, a substitute. The rules I learned about the rubies are only part of the rules of the whole world. But, Wang Wu said, her face became very complicated. Paying your sincerity to 7 girls at the same time, you've really taken a big step on the road of scum. I don't remember teaching a playboy disciple. Wang Lu sneered in his heart. You have the cheek to say that, a man of wine, women, avarice, and temper. But on the other hand, he showed a deep expression and said to Wang Wu softly, with others, it's just a game. You and I have been together for 100 years. It's fate, a match made in heaven. You should know that deep in my heart, you are the only one. F***ck. Wang Wu screamed and directly jumped away from the head of the bed like a catapult. Her back heavily hit the wall of the palace, causing the dust to rustle down. Then she looked like she was in so much pain that she wanted to die. Her 10 fingers kept scratching her 2 arms, and she kept moaning. It's so uncomfortable. I feel like my bones are aching and itching. Wang Lu slammed the bed angrily. What kind of attitude is that? Who told you to say such disgusting words first? And you were so close to me. I feel like someone poured feces on my face. Is that so? Then listen to me again. Your eyes are like the stars in the night sky, forever in my heart. I've been wandering in another world for 100 years. Every time I look up at the stars, I'll think of your eyes and your gentleness. Ah, shut up, shut up. Wang Wu couldn't stand still. She used her hands to cover her ears and screamed. My love for you is as eternal as the Kunlun Mountains, as endless as the endless sea. Wang Wu immediately rolled on the ground. Help! My traitorous disciple is killing me. Seeing that the other party had even used the trick of rolling on the ground, Wang Lu finally couldn't go on. He really couldn't win this battle of shamelessness. After a while, Wang Wu got up wearily. I'm really scared of you. What you said just now made me want to die. Wang Lu was still a little unwilling. Don't you have any resonance in your heart? The resonance you said is similar to the resonance of a heart attack? Then my resonance just now was really big. Alas, the blue sea turns into mulberry fields. Wang Lu couldn't help but sigh with emotion. In the past 100 years, Wang Wu's changes were really too great. If it was 150 years ago, if the big brother she admired could say such words to her, she would have cried tears of joy. But now she was rolling on the ground, afraid to hear another word. To tell you the truth, doting this thing should be different from person to person. Wang Wu explained with a lingering fear. Wang Lu of course knew this truth. He just didn't expect that Wang Wu was actually not interested in his words of love at all. If Yu Xinyao heard those words just now, the young girl probably wouldn't wash her ears for a year. If that's the case, then I won't be unreasonable. My true doting is here. If you want it, then take it. After Wang Lu finished speaking, he took out a high-grade mysterious sky crystal from his mustard seed bag. The next moment, 2 burning eyes locked onto it. Wang Wu's expression changed from awe to shock, from shock to emotion, and finally tears filled her eyes. This is this for me? And it's for you. Wang Wu took the mysterious sky crystal with trembling hands, and the moment the crystal was in her hand, A clear ruby also fell into her palm. Damn, it really works. Wang Lu had nothing to say about this. In the end, was the world created by Dixian too wonderful? Or was it Wang Wu who was too wonderful? However, it was better to solve the problem with money than to solve the problem with the body. Unfortunately, the only one who could solve the problem in this way was probably Wang Wu. Moreover, he was very suspicious that the reason why Wang Wu could be settled with money so easily was because of the ill-fated relationship between the two of them. If it were someone else, perhaps it wouldn't be so easy. While thinking about it, he heard Wang Wu's urging in his ear, Hey, you still need 2 mysterious sky crystals. Give them to me together. Give your sister. Are you going to leave us, the younger generation disciples, and walk away alone? Let me tell you, there's no way. Just be a good girl and stick to the end. Before everyone is gone, you will never be able to leave. Huh? Are you serious? Okay, you go first. I'm going to prepare to dote on other people. Wang Lu very simply and decisively waved Wang Wu away, and began to prepare for the next person's doting problem. According to the previous maid, the emperor couldn't turn over more than 1 card at a time, so he could only solve the problem step by step. The best order was from easy to difficult, starting from the simple. In the end, if he really couldn't pay sincerely to make her happy, he would take out the 3 universal rubies and increase her happiness. So the next candidate, come, call Luli for me. Chapter 583. Senior brother, are you looking for me? Not long after Wang Lu issued the order, the charming girl came to the outside of the bedroom with a curious face. Senior brother, what is this place? It feels so strange. Shouldn't we be in Moon Capital? Wang Lu sighed. It's a long story. Since we're already here, let's just take things as they come. By the way, I have a few pieces of pastries for you to eat. Luli nodded her head vigorously and took the pastries. Her happy smile was pure and innocent, and then she swallowed half of the box of pastries in one gulp. In front of Wang Lu, Luli had always been very relaxed and casual. Her table manners, which had been corrected many times by Zhou Ming, also reverted to her old ways. The cake residue stained the girl's face, but Wang Lu only looked at it with interest. If this child could solve the problem, it would be the best. However, even after Luli had eaten the whole box of pastries, the expected ruby did not come. Wang Lu touched his chin and fell into contemplation. It seemed like it was not that easy to get happiness. From the point of satisfaction, the satisfaction that Luli got from eating the box of royal grade pastries and Wang Wu's mysterious sky crystal should be similar. Luli had always been an easily satisfied child. The difference between the two was probably the difference in emotion. Now that he thought about it, perhaps what really made the ruby come was not the mysterious sky crystal, but when the two of them took over the mysterious sky crystal, the slight touch between their fingers and palms, and at that moment, there were indeed some ripples in their hearts. The previous words of love, no matter how awkward it was for him to say it, no matter how painful it was for Wang Wu to hear it, in the final analysis it was not a lie, at least not completely. Whenever he thought of the dream of crossing over, thinking of the young, clumsy, but persistent and pitiful girl, Wang Lu always felt that there was something more in his heart, and the weight became heavy. Ouyang Shang did not inherit all of his memories, but some fate could not be severed even after crossing the 3 realms. However, in contrast to Wang Wu, when facing Luli, it was difficult for Wang Lu to have any romantic thoughts. It was true that she had big breasts, long legs, and a beautiful face, but Wang Lu, after all, was not an orangutan in heat, so seeing a beautiful person would make him impulsive. Secondly, although he and Luli have been together for a long time, and their familiarity with each other has been far better than that of common disciples, it was precisely because they have been together for too long that the mode of their interaction has been fixed, but it was difficult to have a qualitative change. And deep in his heart, Wang Lu did not want to push for any changes in their relationship. The way the two brothers and sisters interacted with each other was just right. Taking a step forward or taking a step back would seem awkward. However, now was not the time to care about the relationship between the two. Even the royal kitchen-level dessert could not be exchanged for Luli's heart. Obviously, the opportunistic method was not going to work then. Was he really going to play for real? But, in the face of such a child, could he do it? Wang Lu frowned and looked at Lu Li. His head was aching. Senior brother, what's wrong? Lu Li curiously tilted her head. Nothing, I'm brewing feelings. Huh. As soon as Lu Li's naive voice came out, the girl felt that there was one more person in front of her, and then a pair of strong arms appeared on her body. While she was stunned, she was embraced by Wang Lu. As senior brother? Lu Li's eyes widened and froze in place, not knowing what to do. Her voice trembled. Did I do something wrong? After a while, Wang Lu released Lu Li. The girl's face has been dyed red, and her body was as soft as cotton. It took all of her strength to support herself. At the same time, a red gem slowly condensed in front of Lu Li. Seeing the appearance of the gem, Wang Lu gently breathed a sigh of relief. His hard work just now was not in vain. Under the situation of a soft and fragrant body, it really took a lot of effort to restrain himself from doing something. And the result? Indeed, in the past, Wang Lu almost never had any fantasies about Lu Li. However, his thinking was affected by the reality. When the two of them were in intimate contact, as long as Wang Lu's function was still sound enough and his nature was not completely extinguished, his heart would naturally have the thought of loving and spoiling her. Thus the ruby came out. Lu Li, collect the gem. Although the method was somewhat utilitarian since the result was good, then everything was good. He just had to follow the prescription and do it a few more times. Then Wang Lu hugged Lu Li again and got another gem. At this time, Lu Li could no longer stand steadily and softly fell to the ground. Thereupon, Wang Lu picked her up and finally gently touched her forehead with his lips. With a cry, Lu Li's whole body trembled, but at the same time, she had already gathered the 3 gems in her hand. With the 3 gems in her hand, Lu Li was directly expelled from this world. The girl in Wang Lu's arms was nowhere to be seen. Phew, the first one is finally done. Using water element spell, he gathered a basin of bone-chilling cold mysterious water and sprinkled it on his head. Wang Lu cooled down the restlessness in his heart and began to prepare for the next concubine. Someone call Yuxinyao here. To some extent, Yuxinyao was easier to deal with than Lu Li. Lu Li was actually very ignorant about feelings. Although she had been very close to Wang Lu all these years, it was only out of instinct. If it weren't for Wang Lu's exceptional behavior today, perhaps it would take many years for her to realize that she had an extraordinary feeling for Wang Lu. However, Yuxinyao had already made her own idea clear many years ago. The problem was only Wang Lu's reaction. And how could a professional adventurer not know what he should do? After 2 hugs and a kiss on the forehead, Wang Lu smoothly sent off Yuxinyao. However, unlike Lu Li, after sending off Yuxinyao, Wang Lu always felt that his heart began to become a bit heavy, as if there were more shackles. It seems like I'm not a natural scum after all. Having a harem would give me psychological pressure. Regardless of what those girls thought of him, if he wanted to successfully condense the hearts, Wang Lu himself must be truly moved. Opportunistic tricks would not be able to get away with it. However, if he was moved too much, it would be a burden. Even Wang Lu couldn't avoid this. Fortunately, there are 3 rubies as support, otherwise this would be really difficult. While thinking, Wang Lu called the next person in. Bai Shixian, come here. The meeting with Little White ended faster than Yuxinyao, and the process was somewhat dreamlike. Because when Bai Shixian came in, Wang Lu didn't see the familiar and quiet girl, but instead saw a woman deep in his memory. Grand Cloud? Grand Cloud Fairy, who once dreamed for 1,000 years in the Green Lake, carried a unique memory. When they met again, he couldn't help but sigh. Although he knew that this was mostly just an illusion, Wang Lu still unconsciously appreciated the peerless beauty of Grand Cloud Fairy. The dream was very short. Before long, the figure of Grand Cloud Fairy disappeared, and together with Bai Shixian, they were sent out of this harem world. Just a dream meeting can satisfy the conditions. Is this a kind of dream? With a bit of self-deprecation, Wang Lu called the next candidate. Catgirl, come here. Wang Lu has always been curious why even this stupid cat demon could be selected by Dixian to enter this harem world. The other girls, more or less, had some possibility of developing an ambiguous relationship with him. Only this cat girl, Wang Lu really had no interest in her. It was not because this cat girl, who came from Beastmaster School, had long been trained into a used shoe. Nor was it because he had any discrimination against monsters and the like. More than half of the reason was that the cat girl always had a trace of hostility toward Wang Lu. Of course, because of her identity and status, even if the cat girl was hostile, she didn't dare to take action. However, since she didn't like him, Wang Lu didn't need to like her. Since the end of the Grand Cloud trip and after he brought the cat girl back to Spirit Sword Mountain, Wang Lu rarely dealt with her. Until today. To deal with the cat girl, although Wang Lu found it troublesome, he also had a way. To dote on the cat girl, he could start with the simplest lust. Although he had no feelings for her, objectively speaking, the cat girl still had the charm of a female creature. Especially after being seriously developed by the professional trainer of Beastmaster School, the temptation of her body was extraordinary. As for how to let the cat girl put down her hostility and accept all of this with peace of mind, here these two are for you. Wang Lu easily solved the problem with 2 of Lu Li's underwear. Since the last Grand Cloud trip, Wang Lu found that the cat girl was very attached to the 2 people, especially Lu Li, and even regarded herself as a loyal guard, although Lu Li didn't need it at all. Therefore, it could be assumed that she conspired against the 2 people. As a result, he used the underwear to bait her, and sure enough, she took the bait. As for the source of the underwear, previously when he hugged little Lu Li, Wang Lu took it away a little bit. And that was why he put Lu Li in the first place. Her clothes had a very important role. After gaining the cat girl's favor, after a few hugs and caresses, the gems were successfully condensed. After dealing with the cat girl, Wang Lu found Zhu Shiyao. How to give favor to this cold big sister was indeed a problem, but fortunately, Zhu Shiyao was not an ordinary person. After Wang Lu found her, he didn't say much nonsense and immediately sent out a primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi. Although it wasn't an all-out attack, it was already an attack that was difficult to resist for ordinary king pill cultivators. However, Zhu Shiyao easily used her finger as a sword, and the Great Sun Golden Brilliant Sword easily broke the primal chaos sword chi. However, after this sword strike, Zhu Shiyao gradually showed an incredible look, and soon, a trace of redness appeared on her face. She looked very excited. Wang Lu smiled as soon as he saw this. Big Sister was indeed Big Sister. Her degree of sword fanaticism was far higher than that of her peers. This primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi contained all of Wang Lu's understanding after the emergency king pill. Compared with the original version, it was quite different. Although it couldn't be said to be better than the version of Bailey Sword Demon, the details were undoubtedly more suitable for Wang Lu to play, and the attributes and changes of the sword chi were also very valuable. For Zhu Shiyao, the value of this sword strike was no less than that of the mysterious sky crystal for Wang Wu. As for the favorability, it was not a big problem. After all, Zhu Shiyao was a beauty with impeccable appearance. Wang Lu resisted the increasingly heavy burden in his heart. While Zhu Shiyao was immersed in the aftertaste of the primal chaos heaven-splitting sword chi, unable to extricate herself, he touched her face, his eyes sweeping up and down the attractive curves of her body, forcing himself to have fantasies. So, although the quality was quite lacking, he still got 3 rubies. The last person was the lady boss's turn. When he saw Fengling, without saying anything, Wang Lu directly gave her the first 3 rubies. "Hey, what do you mean by this?" Fengling was still completely puzzled. "Good buddy, don't ask why. With our friendship, do you still care about a few gems?" "That's true." Fengling nodded, and then before she could say more, she was directly transmitted out of the harem with a face full of amazement. Wang Lu was greatly relieved. It was not that he was dissatisfied with the lady boss. In fact, when it came to friendship, the friendship between the 2 of them was the deepest. As early as before they climbed the Spirit Sword Mountain, the 2 had already established a deep revolutionary friendship in the inn. However, after many years of great friendship, coupled with the forthright temperament of the lady boss, Wang Lu had always regarded her as a brother. In addition, just now, he had dealt with 5 people in succession plus Wang Wu, that was 6 people. Wang Lu's inner world had long been overwhelmed, and the burden of stepping on multiple boats almost dragged down his non-phase immortal heart. Therefore, if Wang Lu wanted to have evil thoughts in his heart again, the difficulty was really too high. Overall, the progress was far better than expected. At first, he thought that as long as there were 3 people left, Relying on the new gems that were produced every day, he could steadily pass this round. However, all the way he had actually reached the last step. Then he would solve the problem directly with the gems. Next is the last one. According to the agreement, it's finally your turn, master. As soon as Wang Lu's voice fell, his master's white dress appeared in front of him. However, different from what he expected, there was no expectation on Wang Wu's face. At least not the kind of expectation that Wang Lu was looking forward to. Wang Lu thought that she would be impatient from waiting, wishing that she could get more mysterious sky crystals a step earlier. However, the current Wang Wu looked like she was waiting for a good show to begin. Moreover, the trace of a malicious smile on her face was suspicious no matter how he looked at it. "What are you laughing at?" "I'm not laughing," Wang Wu said, trying very hard to suppress her trembling abdominal muscles. Wang Lu looked at her for a while, but still couldn't guess what she was thinking. However, considering that this person's brain circuit had always been different from ordinary people, there was no need to worry about these details at this time. In short, take your mysterious sky crystals and leave. Do you really want to end this dream of a harem? Wang Wu lightly took the mysterious sky crystal and asked with interest, "Then I wish you good luck, ha ha ha." With a burst of laughter, Wang Wu was finally transported out of the harem. Then, standing alone in the empty and lonely bedroom, Wang Lu couldn't help but frown. "I think the game should be over, right? I've already completed your conditions. Next, it's your turn to fulfill your promise." After saying that, Dixian's voice echoed in the palace. "Previously I made a bet with you. If you can complete this scene without hurting any girls, I'll consider it a pass." Wang Lu said, "Since you still remember then you shall see for yourself whether or not you have fulfilled my conditions." After saying that, the palace next to Wang Lu completely disappeared. This was the first time that Wang Lu saw the scene outside the palace. The layout of the scene was very simple. It was a dazzling white. In the vast expanse of whiteness, Lu Li, Yu Xinniao by Shixian plus Wang Wu, the 7 women formed a circle, standing less than a dozen feet away from him. It was just that the expressions of these people were very strange. Wang Wu wanted to laugh, but she forced herself to hold it back. The lady boss, with her hands on her hips, shook her head and sighed, seemingly quite regretful. However, these 2 people weren't the main point. The problem was Lu Li, Yu Xinniao, and the others' eyes were red and swollen, and tears kept flowing down. This was the first time that Wang Lu saw them so sad. "Hey, what's wrong with you guys?" Wang Lu was full of concern and curiosity, ready to ask about their situation. However, at this time, a light suddenly flashed through his mind. Wait a minute. Previously, Lu Li and the others collected the 3 hearts and were sent out of the palace. Then where were they sent to? Although it seemed that once they were sent out of the harem scene, did they really leave? Or were they arranged to stay outside the palace, clearly observing every scene that happened inside the palace? Hugging Lu Li, hugging Yu Xinniao, hugging the cat girl Ling Yan, meeting with the Grand Cloud Fairy in his dream, as well as some fantasies that arose in the process of getting along with them. All of these scenes fell into their eyes without a single mistake. Although in theory the latecomers couldn't see what happened before, Wang Lu didn't think that a recording crystal was a complicated technology. At this time, listening to the suppressed sobs of the several girls, there was only one thought in Wang Lu's mind. Am I going to die? Chapter 584. The scene of a group of girls shedding tears made Wang Lu's skin tense up. Wang Lu had a rough idea of why they were crying. Although the kiss and hug just now were full of utilitarian intent, every move was from the heart and affected the heart. Love was a feeling that contained possessiveness. Sharing love with others was not human nature. Wang Lu asked himself. Even the most indifferent person like Zhu Shiyao would not be happy if she was hugging and kissing a strange man at this time. But if it was Lu Li and the others seeing him being intimate with someone else, they would naturally be sad. Even if they didn't understand why he was sad. How about it? What else do you have to say? The cold question interrupted his thoughts. Dixian, who insisted on being a woman, floated over. His proud face was a clear contrast to the people's sobbing. Seeing this winner's face, Wang Lu was also convinced. It was not because of the other party's scheming, but purely because of the other party's thick face. It was true that he hurt people's hearts by stepping on more than one boat, but the situation just now was out of his control. Every setting of the scenario led him to do so. If he didn't get 3 hearts, he couldn't pass the level. If he didn't give his love, he couldn't get the hearts. So what else could Wang Lu do? Using a kiss on the cheek and a hug to solve the problem was already very humane. If it was someone with a slightly weaker willpower, they would have already rubbed against each other and made love. Thinking of this, even Wang Lu admired his willpower. Moreover, from Wang Lu's original intention, even the kiss on the forehead and the hug were unnecessary. He never thought of having intimate contact with so many girls, at least not in this situation where his freedom was not guaranteed. But if he didn't do this, he couldn't pass the level, and if he didn't pass the level, he couldn't defeat the Twisted Dixian. Therefore, Wang Lu had to be selfless and sacrifice himself. Fortunately, the above steps were one-on-one. At the time, Wang Lu thought that the setting was not anti-human to the extreme and gave some leeway. As long as he didn't let other women see him being intimate with others and send everyone out at once, there would be no problem. However, Dixian's stubbornness or shamelessness was eye-opening. He actually set up another game in the middle. At this point, he really had nothing to say. Her hatred for men had reached the point where she completely ignored reason and logic. She self-directed a good show and then pushed all the blame onto men, as expected of the product of schizophrenia. Saying another word to someone like her would be a waste of time. Nothing to say? Haha, this is what you men are like. You hurt one woman after another, but you don't even apologize or reflect on yourself. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu finally could not bear it anymore. In fact, from these 2 sentences, Wang Lu vaguely caught a glimmer of light. This self-proclaimed heavenly Dixian was most likely hurt by a successful and famous man. Although she could understand that the other party had his reasons emotionally, she was always unwilling and just wanted an apology from the other party. However, she didn't get that apology and finally died of depression. It was not until thousands of years of brewing in the group of immortal tombs that she finally suffered from schizophrenia and became a female supremacist clown. However, even if he understood all this, the anger in Wang Lu's chest would not be extinguished. Damn it, I didn't say anything, but you actually want a foot after giving me an inch? Moreover, it's fine to target me, but don't you think that treating Lu Li and the others as victims is worse than what you said? A man who specializes in hurting people's heart? As for me, I should blame myself for hurting people's heart because of my carelessness, but because of this, how much anger do you, the culprit, have to bear? Perhaps the old saying is true. A shameless person is invincible. Since you are shameless to this point, then I will not be polite. Previously, I always abided by the bottom line in my words and deeds, which led to my hands and feet being tied, and instead I was trampled on by others. Shamelessness? That was simply displaying slight skill in front of an expert. In 9 regions and 3 realms except for Wang Wu, no one has the qualification to show shamelessness in front of me. Wang Lu's face was as solemn as water. What a joke, why should I apologize? A joke suddenly interrupted Dixian's long-winded chatter. Dixian did not expect that Wang Lu would dare to boldly contradict him in a defeated situation. For a moment he was at a loss for words. We've hurt so many people, but Wang Lu sneered and interrupted the other side. They are crying tears of joy. What does it have to do with injury? What did you say? I said they are very happy now. If it weren't for you, this blind trash, clamoring here, it would be a beautiful family scene. You, this slut, keep nagging here. Could it be that you want to be a third party? Dixian angrily glared at him. For a moment he was at a loss for words. After a long time, he moved to Lu Li's side and pointed at the girl's swollen eyes. Do you want to say that she is happy like this? Of course. She is very happy. Can you believe what you just said? Why not? Men and women are different. The way they express sadness and joy are different. And now they are expressing joy in their own way. You are also a woman, but you can't see it. Hearing this, Dixian didn't even know how to refute. I know you don't believe it. It's hard to win people's trust with empty words. Today I will let you know clearly why you lost. Wang Lu let out a long laugh and also walked to the front of Lu Li. With his head held high, He strode with a domineering momentum that was not inferior to Dixian. In terms of strength, Wang Lu was less than 1% of the other side. But when the two stood face to face, their momentum was almost able to compete with each other. Wang Lu knew that this was not because the other side was soft-hearted, but because she was curious about what he was going to say next, so she didn't fully suppress him. At the same time, the source of chaos was also secretly supporting him. However, the key to victory was still his performance. If he couldn't really convince the other side, his momentum at this time was just a bluff. Of course, Wang Lu's confidence in winning was absolute. "Luli, I ask you, why are you crying?" Luli looked up at Wang Lu. Her eyes were still red and pitiful. She looked a little wronged, but more than that, she was confused. "I don't know. It's just that when I was arranged to be here, looking at senior brother and them, I felt uncomfortable for no reason." Dixian sneered. Listen clearly, her heart is uncomfortable." Wang Lu ignored her and continued to ask Luli, "Heart is uncomfortable. Do you hate me, your senior brother?" Luli gently raised her delicate eyebrows and softly said, "No, how could I hate senior brother? It's good that you don't hate me. I have always liked you. Hehe." Hearing Wang Lu said that she liked him, Luli suddenly smiled through her tears. "I also like senior brother the most. Humph, sweet words and flowery words to deceive women are really good." Wang Lu continued to pretend that Dixian didn't exist and asked Luli, "Just now when I was close to your big sister and the others, you said your heart was uncomfortable. Let me ask you, do you want me to never contact them again?" Upon hearing this, Luli was stunned. "Never contact them again?" "Yes, don't talk to them, don't see them, don't care about everything that happens to them. Because being close to them makes you uncomfortable. I will never do that again. Do you want that?" "No, I don't want that," Luli sternly said. Although Luli doesn't know many things, Master has taught me many times that fellow disciples should love each other. Moreover, if I do that, senior brother, you will be sad, right? I know the feeling of sadness, so I don't want you to be sad." Wang Lu's heart couldn't help but be moved. This child is so well behaved that it makes people feel pity for her. "It's not in vain that I chose you as the material to prove my point of view. You really didn't disappoint me. Then later on, when I'm close to them, I will hide it from you, not letting you know. How about it?" Luli hesitated for a moment and then shook her head. "No, I don't want senior brother to hide it from me." Then when you see me being close to them, what should you do if your heart is uncomfortable?" Luli brightly smiled. "If my heart is uncomfortable, just cry it out. When the time comes, if senior brother can comfort me like this, that would be even better." Wang Lu sighed and then touched her head. His heart was also filled with emotion. Fortunately, the first choice was her. This child's performance was simply perfect. Then it's my turn to perform. After Wang Lu and Luli finished their conversation, he turned his head and looked at Dixian. "Did you hear it?" Dixian sneered. "I heard it clearly. It's nothing more than a despicable man relying on a woman's tolerance to be promiscuous." "You're wrong again. I gave her the right to choose. It's her who wants to see me being intimate with other women. It's her who wants me to continue to be friendly with other women. And it's her who chooses to continue to like me and get close to me. Otherwise, she could ignore me, alienate me, and never see me again. Everything is her choice, her love, so the feeling of sadness is naturally her choice. It's her choice to be sad, to cry, because all of this is a way for her to express her love. What's wrong with me saying that she cried tears of joy?" "You are twisting words and forcing logic." "Yes, I took the logic, so the logic is on my side. But your logic was taken away by me, so you have no logic at all. In fact, the relationship between men and women is the coexistence of smiles and tears. If you really despair for a person, your heart will be like dead ashes, and you will never come in contact with him. If a woman knows that she will feel sad and wronged, but she still chooses to be with a man, it can only mean that she likes it. It's in her nature to enjoy sadness and pain." Ridiculous. Ridiculous? Aren't the biggest readers of those popular sad novels like you women? It's in your nature to enjoy tragedy, whether you admit it or not. If you're dissatisfied with this, you should blame the strange nature of you women. What does it have to do with men? "Shut up," Wang Lu sneered. "Even if I shut up, can it prove that you've won? You might as well kill me with your sword." You're not convinced, you don't believe that you women naturally like pain. This is not surprising, so I'll let you see it more clearly. Wang Lu said and reached out his hand to hook his finger at someone who has been watching the show. Wang Wu, let me ask you, do you naturally like to be whipped, abused and trampled by others? The more painful your body and mind is, the happier you are. Can't you sleep if you don't break a few bones every day? Hearing this, the blue veins on Wang Wu's forehead bulged, and the vicious words in her heart were 10 times, 100 times more, rushed toward Wang Lu. However, she, after all, understood that there were priorities. Right now, Wang Lu needed to establish his victory, and this victory was not only about Wang Lu, but also about the safety of everyone. So she had to cooperate to the end. That's right. Wang Wu gritted her teeth and said word by word, "You're right, my nature is like this." Wang Lu said to Dixian, "Did you hear that? Women are like this. If you're not satisfied, I can continue asking. I have absolute confidence in proving that they are all crying tears of joy. I just don't know if you're willing to listen." Of course, the other party was not willing to listen, because the more she listened, the more she was moved, and the faith she had been holding on to for many years was gradually loosening. But she was even more unwilling to admit defeat. But before she could speak, Wang Lu said, "You set the rules. Now that I've satisfied your conditions, you might as well just pull out your sword and go back on your words. Anyway, I've never expected you women to be willing to admit defeat." Ha 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 ha. As soon as he said that, the laughter of the source of chaos exploded in the white world. She doesn't admit defeat verbally, but the defense in her heart is riddled with holes. Now that things have come to this, even if she doesn't want to admit defeat, there's no way. As he spoke, the entire world bloomed with countless fine black cracks, and the world that belonged to heaven was broken in an instant. "I've waited a long time for you to show a flaw." Wang Lu vaguely saw that when the world of heaven was broken, 2 shadows, one black and one white, gradually intertwined and fused into one. This process was very intense, but the level of what happened was far higher than reality. So much so that Wang Lu, with the cultivation of King Pill, could only see a scale claw from afar, and even this scale claw could not be seen clearly. If he could not see clearly, then so be it. At least Wang Lu knew that the source of chaos had finally seized the opportunity to swallow and fuse the old enemy that had been locked in a stalemate for many years. It seemed that this journey of asking the heaven could finally come to an end. It could barely be considered a glorious victory. Facing Dixian with King Pill, facing a bigot that did not speak logic and reason, he was able to crush her heart and cause her faith to waver. If it were anyone else in this world, it would be difficult for them to do better. Although the final victory did not rely on the sword in his hand, which went against the aesthetics of swordsmanship, the winner was not to be blamed, and Wang Lu would not haggle over it. The only problem now was Wang Lu closed his eyes. He did not want to look back at the scene behind him. Yuxinyao by Shixian Lady Boss. He really did not want to think about the faces of these people. When he thought about it, it was as if his primordial spirit was injured by the god-slaying sword. That argument just now was only useful against Luli. If it was against Yuxinyao, "Do you mind being intimate with other women?" then it would definitely be a slap in the face. Therefore, although the problem of heaven was solved, his own problem was not. Not only was it not solved, it was even more serious. Because just now, when he eloquently argued in front of heaven, other people were not deaf, of course they could hear it clearly. "Wang Lu, what you said just now, was it all true?" The voice of Lady Boss Fengling came from behind him. "Women are born to be cheap. If they don't feel pain, they won't feel comfortable. I didn't expect you to have such a good understanding of women. In the future, when we have time, let's have a good exchange." Exchange what? Bodily fluids. Chapter 585. It took a long time for Dixian to split and fuse. After no one knows how long, the source of chaos finally completely swallowed up the heaven. The black and white colors merged into one, and a beautiful figure broke out from the once ugly meatball. At the same time, the whole world had become clear. There was no longer a chaotic world, and there was no heavenly earth. The cultivators in the sky and the chaotic creatures on the ground had all disappeared without a trace. There was only a vast grassland, and the warm sunlight shone over the distant mountains, creating ripples on the meadow like the surface of a lake. We meet again. In front of her, Wang Lu, who was dressed in a red and white uniform, nodded. It's been a long time, really? Took a long time? My impression of it is not clear anymore. As she said that, the woman's eyes gradually became deep. Unexpectedly, there is a day where I can see the light of day again. Fart, in this group of immortal tombs, as long as you think about it, there are as many suns in the sky as you want. Hehe, I still need to be able to think about it. The woman didn't mind Wang Lu's rudeness at all. When I fell into a deep sleep last time, I never thought that I could wake up. But let's not talk about this first. Has your problem been solved? With that, the woman looked at Wang Lu curiously. After the fusion, this Dixian was no longer the paranoid and almost crazy Heaven. Her mind was unprecedentedly clear. Thus, in her view, Wang Lu's argument just now was not worth mentioning. At the same time, she also noticed that Wang Lu did not really solve the problem. Although he defeated Heaven, he did not defeat the Azura field that belonged to him. How should he deal with those girls whose hearts were hurt by him? Wang Lu snappily replied, "It's none of your business." "I'm curious," the woman calmly said. "Before I escaped to the group of immortal tombs, you should have guessed my experience. At that time I was really hurt by that man, so I fell into mental instability. After thousands of years, I still think that although that man hurt me, he is undoubtedly the most respected and admired hero in the world. Even he could not deal with the problem. I want to know how you did it?" Wang Lu rolled his eyes at her. "I'm good at living. Haha. You're such an interesting person. You're obviously very reserved, but you still have to put on such a vulgar face. If you could really use your big tool to make a harmonious relationship, you could have used your ability to subdue everyone in that scene, instead of leaving a hidden danger for others to take advantage of. I know you're very resistant to indulging in sensual pleasures, and you won't take action if you're not sincere. So I'm even more curious, how did you clean up the mess?" "Well, it's fine if you really don't want to answer, but I can make a deal with you. You tell me how you dealt with that problem, and I'll answer a few of your questions. I believe you must have a lot of questions about the group of immortal tombs. It just so happens that I participated in the construction of the group of immortal tombs from the beginning, so I know a lot." Wang Lu didn't buy this at all. "Come on, let's not talk about anything else. I helped you unify your spirit, which is equivalent to giving you a new lease of life. It's not too much for you to repay me with your body. Can you not answer a few of my questions?" "You're right. According to the rules of the group of immortal tombs, the more difficult the challenge is, the more generous the reward will be. You've passed my test perfectly, so it's more than enough for me to answer a few of your questions. But actually, I have something else to give you." With that, the woman reached out her hand. Wang Lu suddenly felt a shock on his waist, and then his mountain sword Kuan involuntarily jumped out. The sword spirit Autumn Beam stood on the side. "What a rare good seedling." The woman softly sighed with emotion. Although the sword body is mediocre, the sword spirit has cultivated for thousands of years, the sword heart is clear, and the sword intent is full. This is really not easy. For it to fall into your hands and let you use it like this, it's really a reckless waste. Wang Lu turned his head to look at Autumn Beam. The latter also curiously turned her head to look at him. "Autumn Beam, do you think I've been licking your boots all these years?" Autumn Beam earnestly replied, "When I first followed Master's cultivation base was still shallow. I had to go through 9 layers of seal before I could be freely controlled by you. At that time, I did have some prejudice against you. But over the years, you've let me witness too many miracles that I haven't seen in the past 1,000 years. Now, although you're only at the peak of King Pill, your strength has already surpassed my previous masters. Primal Chaos Heaven-Splitting Sword Chi is an immortal-level sword technique from the ancient times. It's mountain sword Kuan that can't keep up with your footsteps." "You're wrong," Dixian softly interrupted. "I can't keep up with him because he didn't use you correctly. Although middle-rank spiritual treasure is not a treasure handed down from generation to generation, its power is not inferior to that of King Pill-level cultivators. Not to mention that your sword heart has already been formed, so you can be regarded as a living creature. Among the middle-rank spiritual treasures, you also have the top qualification. In my time, this was one of the conditions to be promoted to immortal treasure. Immortal treasure? Wang Lu was surprised when he heard this. He looked at Autumn Beam up and down more seriously, and then softly said, "This matter can't be known by Wang Wu. Autumn Beam, if Wang Wu wants to ask you out in the future when I'm not here, remember not to agree to her." "I'll remember," Dixian said again. The sword of Mount Kuan is a sword of the 5 elements. Only by combining it with the 5 elements spells can its power be pushed to the limit. Its sword body is thick and stable. If it's mainly used for defense, it's also suitable. But your defensive sword technique looks simple and unadorned, but the complexity of its changes is amazing. As for Brother Ming's Primal Chaos Heaven-splitting sword Qi, it has a simple and crude method to use. But that kind of heaven-defying sword intent that breaks through everything is incompatible with the sword of Mount Kuan. The 2 sword techniques that you're best at are not compatible with the sword of Mount Kuan. So even if it's 100% powerful, you can only use 30% to 40% at most. Wang Lu sighed. How could I not feel what you're saying? However, first of all, the present era is different. It's not like the ancient times where spiritual treasures and immortal treasures are everywhere. A spiritual treasure level flying sword itself is already very rare. How could it be qualified to be picky? Second, the sword of Mount Kuan might not be compatible with me, but Autumn Beam's loyalty and quick-wittedness are hard to find in the world. Moreover, she has made great contributions in the life and death battle, so it's good to be her friend. In any case, when I practice Primal Chaos Heaven-splitting sword Qi, I also practice the method of replacing the sword with the finger. So, in fact, you're recklessly wasting God's gift. The Dixian woman covered her mouth and chuckled. But, I happen to have something here that can let the sword of Mount Kuan exert its due power. With that, she took out a pink dagger. The sword was only a foot long. The sword body looked light and ethereal, but it was actually very sharp. Just by looking at it from a distance, it made people feel a burst of chill. Right now, Wang Lu was also a sword expert. After observing it for a moment, he slightly frowned. The material of this sword is extraordinary, but it looks like it's dead. You're not mistaken, this sword is indeed dead. In the past, she followed me into the group of immortal tombs and was buried with me. Unfortunately, after 10,000 years I woke up, but she couldn't. In other words, this was a flying sword that had lost its sword spirit. Judging from its quality, it was probably a peak-level spiritual treasure or even immortal treasure when it was alive. However, the sword spirit had been lost. Just like a corpse, its power was greatly reduced. At this time it was taken out. Could it be? Yes, let Autumn Beam absorb this rouge tears, and then she can be reborn. If it goes well, it's not difficult for her to directly upgrade to immortal treasure level. It's not that simple, right? Wang Lu questioned. Absorbing the immortal sword to upgrade sounds good. But with Autumn Beam's current strength, absorbing the immortal sword is tantamount to a snake swallowing an elephant. It can't be digested at all. That's why I will do it. In the past, I could also personally refine immortal treasures. Although now my strength is not at its peak, I can still attach your sword spirit to the rouge tears. Of course it's not easy, and I have to pay a considerable price. Wang Lu pondered for a moment. This gift is not light. For me, a handy sword of Mount Kuan is more precious than a brand new immortal sword. Dixian said with a smile, then it should be more than enough to be used as a reward for clearing the trial, as well as to repay your grace of rebirth, right? Yes, that's true. So, if you want to know the secret of the group of immortal tombs, please exchange it with your secret. Wang Lu was deeply convinced by the vigorous gossiping spirit of this Dixian girl. Just for a pain-in-the-ass question, she really didn't hesitate to pay the price. According to normal circumstances, an immortal sword was already enough to make up for Wang Lu's previous hard work. After all, it was a top magical treasure that was rarely seen in the entire 9 regions. By placing Autumn Beam on rouge tears, they would have the opportunity to fuse into one after several decades. And what Dixian girl wanted to do was to artificially shorten this process. Even Dixian had to pay a heavy price for going against the heavens' will. She was really willing. Very well, since you're so obsessed with this question. Wang Lu sighed and revealed the answer. The woman closed her breath and her eyes were full of concentration. For Wang Lu, perhaps this problem was not worth mentioning. However, for her, it was the demon that had plagued her for thousands of years. Now that she was clear-minded, she was no longer obsessed with men and women. However, she still wanted to know if there was a solution to the problem that made her heartbroken. Actually, it's very simple. I told Wang Wu to help me get rid of those women, and I will give you the remaining 3 mysterious sky crystals. And then I don't know. In any case, the problem is handed over to her. How she deals with it is her business. I just want the result. Just want the result? This is too sloppy. What if she can't solve the problem? What if she not only can't solve it, but worsens it? Wang Lu shrugged. Then I'll save the 3 mysterious sky crystals. What's the point of thinking so much? In any case, she did solve the problem in the end. She did solve it, but before that, did you trust her that much? She's a person, if she has enough motivation, she can still do things very well. And more importantly, Wang Lu said this, looked left and right, then lowered his voice and said softly, the management of the harem must fully rely on the main palace concubine. Dixian was startled when she heard this. She only felt that this simple sentence contained very profound and exquisite knowledge. He still remembered a long time ago, when the girls around him could get along harmoniously, they all forgot that their love was shared with others. At that time it was indeed because he had a big sister who was good at dancing and playing by his side. Beautiful, intelligent, powerful, she won everyone's admiration, and cleverly maintained everyone's feelings. It was a pity that beauty had a short life, and that big sister couldn't accompany him to the end. After her death, there were more and more conflicts and frictions between men and women, and finally, it fell apart and couldn't be salvaged. Thinking of this, the woman looked at Wang Lu again, only to feel that the figure of this young cultivator overlapped with him more and more, and Wang Lu's current situation was also very similar to him back then. You're very lucky, you must cherish the people around you. Wang Lu smiled and nodded. Then, he remembered something and opened his mouth. By the way, about the management of the harem that I told you just now, if you rely on the main palace concubine, you don't need to tell others. As soon as he finished speaking, Wang Lu heard someone behind him ask, what don't need to tell others? Also, about the management of the harem, what do you mean by relying on the main palace concubine? You mean if you continue asking, the 3 mysterious sky crystals will be gone. Wang Lu looked back at Wang Wu and said with an extremely serious expression. Chapter 586. After the burning heart of gossip was satisfied, Dixian finally got to the point. I am Xian Mo, the 13th generation head of Qianhua sect. Well, I think you probably haven't heard of this sect. Because of me, Qianhua sect died out in my generation. Even after 10,000 years, when it came to the extinction of the sect, Xian Mo still looked full of self-blame and sadness. Wang Lu recalled what he learned in Tengyun Hall, and he did not remember hearing the name Qianhua sect. However, at this time Wang Wu said, Qianhua sect? I remember seeing records about it somewhere. Before the end of the world, it was a big sect that rose rapidly by relying on the struggle of several generations of geniuses. The disciples of the sect were known for their versatility. Is that so? Even after 10,000 years after the end of the world, the name of Qianhua sect is still spread in the world? In this case, I can barely explain it to the ancestors. Xian Mo shook his head. Well, let's not talk much, let's start the reward session. This Rouge Tears was once a peerless immortal sword, known for its lightness and sharpness. The sword spirit that lived in it was a sword maniac who had reached the Deshang stage, but unfortunately failed to cross the tribulation. He endowed the immortal sword with all kinds of incredible magical powers. Rouge Tears has been with me for many years and has made countless brilliant contributions. Unfortunately, I have never been able to make good use of her. Xian Mo said, patting the sword gently, and the regret on his face became stronger. As the head of Qianhua sect, I once studied swordsmanship for a period of time. This Rouge Tears was also personally refined by him at that time and then passed to me, but I am not a qualified sword cultivator. It is a waste to give this thing to me, so I will pass it on to you, hoping that you can make it shine again. Wang Lu did not rush to take the Rouge Tears. but turned his head and looked at Liang Qiu. What do you think? For you, this is a chance to reach the heavens in a single bound, but it means that you have to abandon your 1,000-year-long past. Although Xianmo promised to help you absorb rouge tears instead of being absorbed by rouge tears, from now on, you are no longer the spirit of the sword of Mount Kuan. Liang Qiu said, with my aptitude, even if I do my best, I will not be able to advance to immortal step. To be able to obtain such an opportunity, Liang Qiu can't ask for more. But as he spoke, the loyal sword spirit couldn't help but lower his head. The body of the sword of Mount Kuan is blunt and clumsy. It really can't follow its master for long. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu smiled. These words meant that old feelings were unforgettable? Or did she have other ideas? But Autumn Beam quickly raised her head. Abandoning the place where I have been staying for the past 1,000 years is indeed something that I am unwilling to do. But to Autumn Beam, being able to continue following Master is more important than anything else. Master, you are a genius, and one day you will be able to cross the tribulation and ascend. I only hope that I can witness that moment with my own eyes. Oh, I have been with you for 20 years, but this is the first time that I find that you have a good eloquence. Wang Lu sighed, patted Autumn Beam's shoulder, and then said to Xianmo, please start. The fusion of Autumn Beam and Rouge Tears was single-handedly handled by Xianmo. For a Dixian, this kind of transformation project that was close to reshaping an immortal treasure was not easy. It was not difficult to separate Autumn Beam from the sword of Mount Kuan. In the case where Autumn Beam did not resist, Xianmo only needed to wave his hand to completely cut off the connection between the sword spirit and the sword body, and at the same time, the sword spirit was not hurt. This alone could not help but make people sigh with emotion at the brilliant means of the ancient Earth immortals. At least in the current union of 10,000 immortals, no master refiner dared to boast that he could do this with ease. But for Xianmo, this was just the beginning. The real difficulty was to put Autumn Beam into Rouge Tears, and to maintain her wisdom in the new sword body, and to keep her sword heart intact. As a sword spirit, Autumn Beam's talent was excellent, but in essence, she was only the sword spirit of a spiritual treasure. Compared to an immortal treasure, she was still too weak. Rouge Tears looked petite and exquisite, but for Autumn Beam it was as vast as the sea. Without the protection of Xianmo, her wisdom would be obliterated in an instant, and she would be assimilated by the sword body, becoming a budding source of wisdom on the Rouge Tears. To grow into a real sword spirit, it would take at least hundreds of thousands of years of nurturing and cultivation. Moreover, after the sword spirit grew up, it would no longer be the original Autumn Beam, but more like her daughter. However, how could the weak Autumn Beam smoothly occupy the powerful Rouge Tears? In today's 9 regions, even in principle this was impossible, let alone in practice. Nowadays, there were a lot of immortal treasures circulating among the major sects, but a considerable part of them were the remains of immortal treasures excavated from the ruins of the previous generation. Among them, the sword spirit had been lost, so the power of the immortal treasures had fallen. If they could master this sword spirit transfer and fusion technique, it meant that at least dozens of immortal treasures in 9 regions could be repaired. Therefore, Wang Lu and Wang Wu insisted on watching the whole process, hoping to learn enough from it. Even if they couldn't use it themselves, they could pass it to those sects that needed it at a high price, which would be profitable. At least, Wang Lu was very clear that in Shangjing sect, there were at least more than 10 broken immortal treasures that needed to be repaired. Xianmo didn't refuse the request to watch from the sidelines, but just said with a smile, "This technique is not that great, but it probably won't be of much use to you." Then she covered her hands on the Rouge Tears, and her 10 fingertips bloomed out a circle of ripples, which surged with each other, causing the Rouge Tears to shake endlessly. Wang Lu narrowed his eyes, making his vision more focused. A moment later, his mind was completely immersed in the changes of the ripples, and he was unaware of the passage of time. This ripple vibration reminded him of something, as if he had seen a similar technique a long time ago. The power was great, but the price was equally great. With Wang Lu's memory and Taoist Master King Pill's primordial spirit attainment, all the details that happened in his more than 30 years of life could actually be used at will. However, at this time his whole mind was used to perceive the ripples, so he had no time to care about it. After an unknown period of time, the ripples gradually stopped, and Wang Lu also came back to his senses. However, when he looked up, the silver hair reflected in front of him made his mind greatly shocked. A moment ago, he saw a beautiful woman who looked to be in her 20s. Now the woman's appearance was still the same, but her black hair had turned into silver, and her deep eyes could not help but reveal the vicissitudes of life. 1,000 years ripples? At the same time, Wang Lu also remembered the true face of the ripples. When he went to the Grand Cloud platform to compete with the Beast Master School, Grand Cloud Fairy used this trick to let him directly advance to shoot on stage, and then he had the capital to fight the Beast Master School head-on. In one night, Wang Lu was promoted to shoot on stage, which was almost a miracle in the current immortal cultivation system. Therefore, Grand Cloud Fairy also paid the price of death. Now that the ripples of time had reappeared, Dixian had forcibly pushed the fusion process of Autumn Beam and Rouge Tears forward by 1,000 years. What kind of tragic price he had to pay. No wonder she said that it was meaningless to learn this trick. In today's 9 regions, who could have such a strong capital to squander? Even if there was, in order to repair an immortal treasure, the gain was not worth the loss. No matter how strong an immortal treasure was, it still needed people to use it. After the 1,000 years ripples, Xian Mo put down the Rouge Tears and somewhat tiredly said, "It's done. Let her adapt for 3 to 5 days and then you can start the sacrificial refining, and then she can use it freely. Thank you for your kindness." Wang Lu cupped his hands across his chest and seriously said, "No need if you want to say that I'm indebted, it's me who's indebted to you. My life should have already disappeared when the group of immortal tombs was built. You opened the group of immortal tombs, stimulated the change, brought me back to life, and even personally removed my demon heart, allowing me to regain my sanity. I've already gained a big advantage by paying this price." Speaking to this, Wang Wu suddenly interrupted, "This Rouge Tears, there's no side effect, right?" "Side effect?" Xian Mo asked. Wang Wu said, "The change in the surrounding spiritual energy and even the law of the main path. In the age of chaos, many cultivators who stood at the peak of the immortal path fell overnight because they couldn't adapt to the environment. Since then, many methods could no longer be cultivated, and many high-level magical treasures have lost their magical effect. And you are undoubtedly a cultivator before the age of chaos. Would the magical treasures repaired by your power be rejected by the current world?" Upon hearing this, Xian Mo was slightly startled, seemingly surprised by Wang Wu's statement. However, she soon shook her head and said with a smile, "Don't worry, there won't be any side effect. Otherwise, this group of immortal tombs was built before the age of chaos, and all kinds of technology used were at the peak level at that time. If the age of chaos transformed the entire world like you said, I'm afraid the group of immortal tombs could not be opened and operated." "So the age of chaos did not transform the world?" Xian Mo said, "I haven't personally experienced the so-called age of chaos, but if it really shakes the entire world, it's impossible for the group of immortal tombs not to be affected. Therefore, at least you can understand it as the existence of the group of immortal tombs can perfectly adapt to the new world." "That makes sense." Wang Wu nodded. "I have no problem with that." Xian Mo said, "I have a question. About the age of chaos, how do you understand it?" "It's a helpless natural disaster. At least that's what the current records say." "Natural disaster, that's right." Xian Mo sighed. "How much do you know about the group of immortal tombs? Did Elder Brother Ming tell you about the origin of this group of immortal tombs?" Wang Lu said he didn't say it in detail. "I only know that the group of immortal tombs is to fight against an extremely powerful opponent." "An extremely powerful opponent. So, in your opinion, what kind of powerful opponent is worthy for us to build such a group of immortal tombs?" This question was actually one of the key questions that Wang Lu had been thinking about for many days. The strength of Dixian could be seen from the strength of the gatekeeper, Zhong Shangming. Even in the glorious era before the age of chaos, such a group of people definitely stood at the top of the world. However, the enemy that they needed to face forced them to choose to lie dormant and pin their hopes on the later generations. What kind of enemy was worthy for a group of proud Dixian to compromise like this? When he first opened the group of immortal tombs, Wang Lu had guessed that it was the demon race. However, now that he had seen the tragedy of the demon world, Wang Lu had long denied this possibility. And with his current vision, there seemed to be only one possibility no matter how he thought about it. Is it the fallen immortal? Chapter 587. Fallen Immortal? When he heard the answer from Wang Lu, Xianmo seemed a little surprised. You guys already know about it? Wang Lu said, more than no, we've already dealt with it. Before he could finish his words, Xianmo's face suddenly sank. Have they already begun to descend? Upon hearing her question, Wang Lu realized that the crisis of the fallen immortal was probably more terrible than expected. They descended. In a single sentence, Wang Lu could not help but picture the scene of dozens of Mr. Fengyu descending on 9 regions in his mind. That would really be the end of the world. However, the situation was not yet desperate. Recalling what Mr. Fengyu did, it was not difficult to see that he tried his best to provoke disputes between the demon world and 9 regions. In fact, it was to pave the way for something. Unfortunately, he failed on the verge of success, and that thing did not reach the last step. At present, there are only advanced troops. The arrival of the main force should still face insurmountable barriers. However, Xianmo shook his head seriously and said, the appearance of the advanced troops means that the situation is already very bad. Well, you don't know the whole picture of the matter, so I'd better start from the beginning. Fallen Immortal. Let's call them by this name for the time being. The earliest record of the Fallen Immortal, for me, is also from the Savage Age a long time ago. According to the history books, one day there was a natural phenomenon. The sky opened and a strange light shone. A creature with black wings on his back came to 9 regions. He claimed to be an immortal and had a powerful divine power that was unimaginable to cultivators. At first, people thought that he was a true immortal from the lower realm, who came with the sacred will of the immortal world and worshipped him like a god. However, soon he did evil in 9 regions, which aroused public anger. Wang Wu asked, what exactly do you mean by doing evil? Xianmo said, this matter is not detailed in the history books, but according to the various historical materials sorted out by later people, the conclusion is that the fallen immortal robbed the Taoist companion of the leader of a high-rank sect and abused her to death. After being insulted like this, how could the sect leader let it go? Unfortunately, although he was known as one of the few experts in the world, he was smashed into a meat patty in 3 moves by the fallen immortal, and then swallowed into the belly of the fallen immortal. His thousands of years of cultivation base turned into nourishment for others. Moreover, this was only the beginning. Later on, he relied on his tyrannical strength, and his absurd and tyrannical actions were too numerous to enumerate. In the end, a large group of cultivators joined forces to resist him. That battle shook the heavens and the earth, and the sun and moon lost their brilliance. In the end, they completely eliminated him, but the cultivation world also paid a terrible price. From then on, people finally realized that those who descended from the upper realm might not necessarily have good intentions. Wait, how did you confirm that he really came from the upper realm of immortals and not some other place such as the demon realm? Whether it's the 9 regions or the demon world, to exaggerate it, it's just a drop in the ocean. From that person's remains, we found clues about his cultivation in the human world. 10,000 years ago, he was indeed a cultivator who cultivated in the mortal world. So that's how it is. After ascending, he forgot his roots? It's not that he forgot his roots. He was originally an evil cultivator in 9 regions, and doing evil is his duty. Xianmo said with a wry smile, but occasionally, similar things happened, and the fallen immortals who descended from the upper realm came from the righteous sections. Wang Lu frowned and said, it's not useful to come from the righteous sects? What exactly did they experience after ascending? Isn't the immortal world the legendary pure land of bliss? You also know that it's just a legend and excuse to induce people to cultivate seriously. In fact, no one has seen what the immortal world looks like, and the true immortals who occasionally descended to the lower realm have never revealed the secrets of the immortal world. But it's not that good. Since ancient times, there have been at least 800 if not 1,000 cultivators who ascended to the upper realm. The more ancient Desolation Age could not be counted. Among them, there were both righteous cultivators and evil cultivators. Moreover, after they ascended to the immortal world, they might not be able to reproduce their descendants, and the descendants might not be able to inherit the character of their predecessors. It's not surprising that there are fallen immortals. The key problem is how to deal with these fallen immortals in the lower realm. Is there no one in the immortal world who cares about this kind of thing? We can't confirm the attitude of the immortal world towards the fallen immortals, because occasionally, true immortals descend to the lower realm, but they have never had in-depth communication with the cultivators, or even had a dialogue with them, so we can't ask them anything about the situation. Optimistically, perhaps they have tried their best to stop the fallen immortals from descending. Otherwise, the number of fallen immortals would be 10 times or even 100 times more than now. But Wang Lu was silent for a while and said, "But it's also possible that the immortals in the upper realm have no interest in caring about the life and death of the people in the lower realm. It's just like how human beings don't care about how much killing their children will cause by scalding an ant's nest with boiling water." Xianemo said, 9 regions is the starting point of the immortal world, but it's only the starting point. The road of immortal cultivation is endless. As people explore the road ahead, the starting point of the past will only become more and more insignificant. Perhaps this is the reason why the upper realm has not descended many times in the past tens of thousands of years. Unfortunately, this continent may not be worth mentioning for those ambitious immortals, but there are always a few scum who enjoy abusing the weak. In short, we can't hope that the upper realm will interfere in this matter. In the fight against the fallen immortals, we can't rely on anyone but ourselves. So there are Dixian immortals like you? Xianemo said with a wry smile. The so-called Dixian immortals are actually just self-flattery to inspire confidence. The opponent is the immortals, who are at a height that hundreds of millions of cultivators in 9 regions can't reach in their lifetime. It takes too much courage to be enemies with them. What's more, our plan is far more radical than that. Oh, are you going to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots and treat both the symptoms and the root causes? Well, it doesn't make any sense to simply gather forces to kill 1 or 2 fallen immortals in the lower realm. As long as the immortals in the upper realm still treat the lower realm unscrupulously, the fallen immortals will only emerge one after another. And every time we fight, we have to pay 10 times or even 100 times the price. For the immortal world, they only lose a scum that can't be cultivated. But in 9 regions, they lose the elites of the immortal path. So specifically, what did you do? We decided to challenge the upper realm, break through the sky, and ask heaven why it condones murderers. If heaven refuses to answer, we will find an explanation for it ourselves. What a radical idea! Even Wang Wu was amazed by the whimsical ideas of these Dixian immortals. Xianemo sighed and said, "If you have cherished people who died in the calamity of the fallen immortals, it is inevitable that you will have radical ideas. In our time, the calamity of the fallen immortals was one of the most frightening natural disasters in the immortal cultivation world. I don't know how many people suffered from it, but later generations have never even heard of the name of the fallen immortals." Wang Lu said, and then after a moment of silence he said, "In any case, it must have been an extremely tragic war." Xianemo said, "It was indeed a tragic struggle. At that time we gathered most of the elites in 9 regions and even united with the kings of the Western continent. We silently endured for half a year. When everything was ready, we tore open the passage to the upper realm, went against the great Tao of heaven and earth, and forcibly set foot on the land of the immortal world. Wouldn't that be a collective ascension?" Without the test of the heavenly tribulation, a cultivator's magical power could not be transformed into pure immortal spirit aura, and thus could not stay in the immortal world for a long time. What's more, we gathered countless resources in 9 regions, not just to create dozens of immortals. In fact, our plan at that time was to a large extent a gamble. The dozens of us could not stay in the immortal world for a long time. No one could say what we would encounter during this time and what we could do. As a result, not long after we entered the immortal world, we met 3 fallen immortals. When they saw us, they were very surprised and attacked us without saying anything. We were forced to fight. In that battle, we paid more than 10 times the casualties and were crippled in just one battle. We were no longer able to carry out in-depth exploration. Even after thousands of years, when talking about that earth-shattering battle, Xianemo still looked distressed. But after that battle, we also realized that there was no need to continue to explore. It was a mistake to pin our hopes on one battle. It only showed that we were still too naive and conceited. The number and strength of the fallen immortals were far beyond our imagination. It was not a problem that our generation could solve at all. Wang Lu nodded and expressed his deep understanding. Not long after they set foot in the immortal world, they met 3 fallen immortals. Moreover, when they met, they immediately fought. This could not be explained by bad luck. It was very likely that the current passage between 9 regions and the immortal world was in the hands of a fallen immortal organization. The world of 9 regions was completely reduced to their breeding ground and back garden. The resistance launched by Xianemo and the other Dixian people, in the eyes of others, was like a beef cow that was unwilling to be left alone and jumped out of the cow pen. But we didn't despair. Even if this generation can't solve the problem, there is still the next generation. The cultivators of 9 regions have been making progress for tens of thousands of years, at least until my time. Therefore, we have always believed that in the distant future, 9 regions would have the power to protect itself. Xianemo sighed and said, at that time we quickly returned to 9 regions, and in the next 100 years, we did our best to mobilize the huge power contained in 9 regions to forcibly block the passage between the immortal world and 9 regions, trying to completely cut off the possibility of the fallen immortals coming. At the same time, we built the group of immortal tombs to preserve what we have learned in our lifetime, as well as the valuable experience left by countless generations of people in the struggle against the fallen immortals. I hope that future generations can benefit from it and take fewer detours. Upon hearing this, Wang Lu just shrugged helplessly and said, unfortunately, the future generations will probably let you down. Yes, when I woke up from my long sleep and saw the 9 regions today, I was indeed very disappointed, even desperate. After 10,000 years, not only did the cultivators not make progress, they were far worse than before. How can we fight against the fallen immortals? The blockade barrier that we laid at that time was, after all, only at the level of Dixian. For those genuine immortals, there must be some flaws. Therefore, it was only a matter of time before they came back to 9 regions. With that, Xianemo revealed a smile and said, however, after seeing the 2 of you, I have a bit of hope for 9 regions. Perhaps today's 9 regions is not so hopeless. Unfortunately, this is just my own idea. Among the companions who received the resuscitation, the majority of them are dissenting. Chapter 588. Resuscitation companions? Do they have objections? Wang Lu quickly caught the point. This time there were more than 1 Dixian resuscitation in the group of immortal tombs, and most of them were in deep despair about the current situation of 9 regions. Then, what are they going to do? Xianemo said, on that day we decided to retreat and lie dormant, pinning all our hopes on the future generations. It was a decision made under great controversy. Could even be said that our leader alone pushed it. Were it not for his high prestige among the group of Dixian and his obvious superior strength in the battle of the upper realm, we might not have given up so decisively. Wang Lu said, so now that they have come back from the dead, are they unwilling to be left out? Xianemo said, no one has ever been willing to be left out. We raised the banner of Dixian and gathered the top experts of 9 regions at that time. Each of them is a living legend. How could we be willing to be under others? And if you haven't seen that era, you can't understand our unforgettable hatred for the fallen immortals. For us to give up our revenge is a more painful choice than death. At that time, our leader promised that the future 9 regions would be more powerful, and there would be rare geniuses that could not be matched by today's people. At that time, he would open the group of immortal tombs and take away our inheritance, and 9 regions would truly have the strength to contend against the fallen immortals. However, when I see it today, I only see that 9 regions is in ruins, the surrounding spiritual energy is exhausted, and the strength of the cultivators is weak. They live a befuddled life, completely unaware that the crisis of the continent is coming. Our sacrifice of enduring humiliation in the past is simply a joke. While speaking, there were several more people in the Pale World. They all had different appearances, but without exception they all had amazing power. One of the young men with raised eyebrows looked at Wang Lu and Wang Wu and said, "Xianmo, is this the person you fancy?" Xianmo corrected him. "It's not me, but Brother Ming. Well, I do think he is worth looking forward to." Zhong Shengming is indeed formidable. More than 10,000 years ago, he was indeed formidable, but the group of immortal tombs has been silent for too long. His primordial spirit is not even complete, and he has split into two demon and god body. How could the judgment made in this situation be accurate? As for you, you've always had good foresight, but your heart is easily swayed. Once someone has done you a favor, it's hard for you to calmly make a judgment. This person helped you get rid of your inner demons, so it's normal for you to favor him. As the young man spoke, he completely overturned Zhong Shengming and Xianmo's judgment. It seemed that Xianmo could do nothing but feel helpless. Wang Lu turned to look at the young man, guessing that he was probably one of the leaders of Dixian's team in the past. Coincidentally, the young man also looked at him. With a glance, his eyebrows jumped slightly. "Void spiritual root? You do have some tricks up your sleeves, but you've been cultivating for quite some time now. How come you're only at the King Pill realm?" The cultivation speed of void spiritual root is extremely fast. In the past, immortal Qin ascended to immortality in 20 years. Even if the surrounding spiritual energy in 9 regions is scarce, after more than 20 years of cultivation, you shouldn't only be at the King Pill realm. Moreover, what about the main path in your King Pill? Zhong Shengming's primal chaos heaven-splitting sword is fine, but what's the other half? The fusion of the two is simply a mess. Speaking to this, the young man could not help but become a bit angry. That day I said that we must fight them to the end. Our lineup is at its peak, and it's a surprise attack, so it's not impossible for us to make a name for ourselves. But the boss insisted on pinning his hope on the later generation. And you all actually agreed. Upon hearing this, Xianmo's face sank. "Are you questioning his decision?" "Yes, I'm questioning it. What's so surprising about it? When he was alive, I constantly questioned it. Now that he's dead, and I've witnessed the decay of 9 regions, of course I have to question it even more. You all worship him like a god, but I only regard him as an ordinary person." Xianmo angrily said, "Bai Zai, you're too presumptuous." Bai Zai laughed. "Is this the first day you know me? I've always been this presumptuous. That's why the boss appointed me as his deputy. Because apart from me, no one else dares to be presumptuous." Xianmo was so angry that his whole body trembled. His eyes turned to the people behind Bai Zai. "What about you guys? Are you just going to let him go?" No one replied. Bai Zai's face sank. "Xianmo, the boss is also a human, not a god or an immortal. It's true that he's more powerful than any of us, but it doesn't mean that he won't make mistakes. And when he makes a mistake, he needs someone to point it out for him. This is the meaning of my existence. I will constantly question his decision and go against him, so that he can always make a rational and calm judgment. Before you realize this, you have no right to accuse me of being presumptuous." Xianmo somewhat painfully shook his head. He couldn't completely accept this statement. Bai Zai said, "You guys have unreserved trust in him, but in the end it's just that all of your responsibilities are pushed to him. Once the boss makes a mistake, it's tantamount to betraying all of your trust. And now isn't it obvious? The boss's judgment is wrong. Betting on the future generations is undoubtedly a wrong bet." Xianmo still wanted to argue, but Bai Zai interrupted him. "I know you're very optimistic about this void spirit root. Yes, he is indeed very powerful. Although there are many problems in his cultivation, as long as he inherits the things in the group of immortal tombs, in less than a few decades, he would be able to keep pace with you and me, and even catch up with the boss's achievement. But what can he do alone? No matter how strong he is, could he be stronger than those immortals who cultivate in the immortal world in 9 regions? We built the group of immortal tombs in the hope of creating an unprecedentedly prosperous 9 regions, a 9 regions with thousands of Dixian, where no one would dare to easily invade. Xianmo, tell me, is the current 9 regions qualified to make people not dare to easily invade?" Xian Mo took a breath but couldn't speak. No matter how much she admired her former leader, she had to admit that the current 9 regions was too different from what she had expected. So, are you going to give up? Give up? Are you kidding me? Bai Zhe scoffed at Xian Mo's question. When have you ever seen me give up halfway? Although the setback this time is a bit serious, it's far from the time to give up. It's just, Bai Zhe sternly said, from now on we can't take any wrong steps. We have missed an opportunity, and I'm afraid there won't be a second time. I don't know why the fallen immortals haven't come in large numbers over the years, but I think it's only a matter of time. Moreover, time is not on our side. Compared with the immortal world, which is full of immortal spirit energy, the speed of cultivation in 9 regions can't be compared. What are you going to do? Bai Zhe said. The first thing is to wake up all the survivors, then take out the treasures in the group of immortal tombs and reassemble the team. After that, lead all the cultivators of the continent to fight against the fallen immortals. Although the odds are not high, it's already. Before he could finish his words, Wang Wu couldn't help it anymore. Lead all the cultivators of the continent? That's a big tone of yours. Before he could finish, Bai Zhe interrupted him again. I know you are not convinced. I believe that all the cultivators in 9 regions are not convinced that they are being stepped on by a group of strangers who have been sleeping for thousands of years, and then suddenly woke up. But think about it, with your little ability, once the fallen immortals come, what else can you do but wait for death? We at least succeeded in repelling the fallen immortals, but what about you? Right now, you're obsessed with the reputation in front of you, but you may ruin the future of the entire 9 regions. However, upon hearing this, Wang Wu just sneered. Once the fallen immortals come, what can we do? That's a good question. Beside Wang Wu, Wang Lu couldn't help but want to laugh. If this problem was placed on other people, it would be fine. But, to show off their achievements against the fallen immortals in front of the golden generation of Lingjian school, a group of Earth True Immortals of Unity Stage and Mahayana Stage gathered the resources of the entire continent to tear the sky and go to the immortal world. As a result, after the battle, they fled and hid themselves in the world. Unexpectedly, they had the face to show off such a record. In the past, Lingjian School, with the power of one faction, fought Mr. Fengyu to death. The courage and wisdom contained in this was far more dazzling than that of Dixian. Perhaps the cultivators after the Age of Chaos were no longer comparable to their predecessors in terms of strength, but it was precisely because they were weak that they tried their best to exert their limited power to the extreme and achieve all kinds of miracles that were incredible in the eyes of their predecessors. In the face of Bai Zhe's condescending attitude, even Wang Wu, who had always been cynical, could not hold back. For her, most things in the world were irrelevant, but the war 150 years ago was a holy war that no one could blaspheme. I didn't intend to take it out, but since I've been asked this question, if I don't show it off, I would be sorry to my long-dead big brother. Before the long-dead big brother had time to say anything, he saw Wang Wu take out a hand from her mustard seed bag. It was a human hand that had been chopped off at the wrist and had been meticulously maintained to this day without losing its vitality. When they saw that hand, everyone present was shocked. Although it was a dead thing separated from the body, the immortal spirit aura still lingered. Impressively, it was the hand of an immortal. Moreover, the immortal spirit aura contained bloody killing intent, which was the standard sign of a fallen immortal. The hand of a fallen immortal, you've actually killed a fallen immortal? Bai Zhe was so shocked that for a moment he could no longer give a speech. However, on the other side, Wang Lu could clearly see that it was not the hand of a fallen immortal, but his own hand. In the official history, at the last moment, Ouyang Shang introduced Mr. Fengyu's primordial spirit into his own body, and then resolutely self-destructed, blowing his soul to death. However, when the other party's primordial spirit entered his body, he had already transformed part of Ouyang Shang's body into an immortal's body. Fortunately, at that time, Mr. Fengyu was seriously injured and weak, unable to completely complete the transformation. Otherwise, Ouyang Shang's self-destruction might not be able to completely eliminate the weeds. However, because he had transformed the immortal's body, in that big explosion, Ouyang Shang's body was lucky enough to leave a few fragments. Wang Lu thought that those fragments had long been cleaned up by the people from Lingjian school, but he didn't expect that the largest piece actually fell into the hands of Wang Wu. You actually kept this thing? Wang Lu looked at Wang Wu incredulously and said, "Don't you find it disgusting?" Wang Wu sighed when she heard this, and there was a hint of complicated emotion in her eyes. This is the most memorable victory medal in my life. How could it be disgusting? Wang Lu gently opened his mouth, but thousands of words were stuck in his throat. However, at this time, he saw Wang Wu gently smiled and said, "Moreover, from a utilitarian point of view, the immortal's hand has endless magical uses. It would be a pity to throw it away. For more than 100 years, the benefits of this hand have been endless for me." Wait a minute, what did you do with my hand? Chapter 589. The Hand of the Fallen Immortal. It seems that the reason why Zhong Shengming let you in is not entirely because he's old and confused. After seeing the spoils of war that Wang Wu took out, even the arrogant Bai Zhe was shocked speechless. An object was better than 1,000 words. Although Bai Zhe didn't believe that the two king pill cultivators in front of him, as well as the extremely weak later generation cultivators after the Age of Chaos, could beat the former Dixian team. However, who told the Dixian team to not have such a good spoils of war at this time? However, Bai Zhe would not easily admit defeat. After a long silence he said, "I understand. For the time being I admit that you do have the strength, but it doesn't mean anything. After all, it's just the remains of a fallen immortal, and it's only a part of it." "Well, I didn't expect to convince you with this thing," Wang Wu said, and then lightly retracted the hand of the fallen immortal. "It's rare to resuscitation from 10,000 years of sleep, so it's unrealistic for you to willingly withdraw from the stage of history. However, there's no reason for us to give up the treasure that we've dug out with great difficulty just because of your words." Bai Zhe frowned and said, "This is not just a treasure. I know that this also means the life and death of 9 regions. But similarly, as the contemporary cultivators of 9 regions, there's no reason for us to entrust our lives to you, these strangers. No matter how good your words are, after all, we are not familiar with each other." Bai Zhe sneered and said, "Then what are you going to do?" Wang Wu said, "Since neither of us is convinced by the other, why don't we have a fair competition? Let's fight for the inheritance of this group of immortal tombs and the leadership in the future." Fair competition? Bai Zhe was surprised. He didn't expect the other party to come up with such an absurd idea. "You want to compete with us?" Wang Wu said with a smile, "That's right. As for the specific method, it can be an arena fight or it can be a league. In short, it can show the strength of both sides vividly in order to determine the more suitable candidate to inherit the legacy and hold the leadership. This way, neither side will have any objections." Bai Zhe was tongue-tied. After a long while, he angrily waved his hand and said, "Challenge the arena and organize a league? The crisis of the fallen immortals is imminent. They may come to 9 regions at any time. We don't have time to play games with you." Wang Lu said faintly, "Then you can also choose to give up everything and be willing to be the pawns of us cultivators of later generations. Since you don't want to waste time, then we'll compromise." "Compromise with incompetent people like you? Otherwise, it will be a fair competition," Wang Lu said. "In short, don't expect us to hand over everything honestly." Before Bai Zhe could get angry, Wang Lu said in a deep voice, "We're cultivators who lived after the Dharma-ending era. Ever since we set foot on the immortal Tao, we've been living in an environment with scarce resources. If we want to reach the peak of the immortal Tao and ascend, we can't afford to make any mistakes or miss any opportunities. Even if it's a small profit, we have to haggle over every penny, let alone such a rich treasure like the group of immortal tombs. This is the way for us, the weak later generations of cultivators, to survive. No matter how great you, the senior cultivators, are, in today's perspective, you're just a group of dead leftovers. In terms of total strength, you're definitely not comparable to today's Wanxian League. Even if your individual strength is not as good as ours, you can't offset our numerical advantage, let alone contend against the fallen immortals. If you sincerely want to protect 9 regions, The only choice is to make full use of the existing strength. And to use our strength, respecting us is a necessary condition. After this high-sounding speech, everyone present fell into silence. Only Wang Wu held back her laughter and secretly gave her disciple a thumbs up. He was indeed worthy to be an orator who could say any kind of fallacious reasoning and heresy. The way for weak cultivators to survive? How could he have the nerve to say it out loud? This was just bullying this group of old antiques who had stayed in the group of immortal tombs for more than 16,000 years. When they walked out of the group of immortal tombs and witnessed the luxurious life of modern people, especially the luxurious cultivation method of Shangjing sect, Wang Lu's speech about the way of survival was like a fart. However, Bai Zhe and the others, after all, didn't understand these things, not to mention that the argument about respect was not wrong. Therefore, after this high-sounding speech, Bai Zhe and the others had nothing to say. How exactly are you going to compete? I'm warning you again, there's no time to waste. Wang Wu said, of course, we don't want things to drag on for too long. But we don't have the final say on how to compete. This is a major matter related to the life and death of the entire 9 regions, so it must go through the collective decision of the Wanxian League. Oh, stop nagging. We know that time is tight, but if we do everything recklessly because time is tight, it will only take longer to correct the mistake. Bai Zhe asked in a deep voice, how long will it take for your collective decision? 1 month is enough. That's too slow. Wang Lu interrupted, then 2 months. To be honest, I think you're a very strange person. No matter how urgent the crisis of the fallen immortal is, it has been more than 16,000 years since the last large-scale outbreak. This kind of crisis that takes thousands of years as a unit, are you really in a hurry to solve it in 1 or 2 months? And more importantly, since you chose to sleep and hand over the responsibility of saving the world to the future generations, then you should have the awareness that no matter what happens later, you will not regret it. Your time is over, and everything that happens after that is our business. We're not in a hurry ourselves, so what are you in a hurry for? You are not like a person who has just woken up. Bai Zhe was immediately annoyed. How dare you question me? Xian Mo hurriedly advised, Bai Zhe has always been impatient, and he has always been the opposition in the team, so it's inevitable that his words are harsh, but you don't have to doubt his character at all. He's a partner who has gone through life and death with us. Wang Lu sneered and said, such a person as a partner? No wonder you lost so miserably. You. Seeing that the contradiction was about to intensify, Wang Wu knew that she should come forward to end it all. The cooperation between her and Wang Lu lay in this echo of each other. Wang Lu was young and his cultivation base was low, so as a junior disciple, he could provoke them at will. She, on the other hand, had to take advantage of the situation to occupy an advantageous position in the negotiation, and take the opportunity to resolve the contradiction to lead the topic in a direction that was beneficial to herself. Then Wang Wu clapped her hands and said, then it's settled. 2 months later, we will organize an official team to discuss with you and set the rules of the competition, and then decide the winner in the fastest time. I know everyone is very anxious, but only by doing it step by step will we not waste time. How about it? While speaking, Wang Wu ignored Bai Zhe and locked her eyes on Xian Mo. Xian Mo quickly nodded. Okay, then it's settled. Wang Wu smiled and said, very well. Then we'll take our leave first. Oh, by the way, there are still those children. Xian Mo said, Lu Li and the others? We've already sent them out. We're not that despicable. We won't threaten you with hostages. Really? That's good. Then, without waiting for Bai Zhe and the others to speak, Wang Wu pulled Wang Lu and disappeared from this vast and white world. When they left the group of immortal tombs, Wang Lu felt a faint chill on his back. Unknowingly, his clothes had been soaked in sweat. After walking out of the gate of the group of immortal tombs, he followed his master with slightly stiff footsteps, slowly walking on the streets of plentiful city like a zombie. He completely turned a blind eye to the strange eyes around him, because at this moment, even when he opened his mouth to speak, he felt that his throat was a bit dry. For a king pill level non-phase cultivator whose body had already been thoroughly tempered, this was simply an unimaginable embarrassment. However, after a head-on confrontation with a group of Dixian, It was already an unimaginable miracle for him to bear such a slight side effect. After a long time, Wang Lu finally got rid of the shock of Dixian and took a long breath. This time it's really thrilling and exciting, making people climax again and again. Really? I just feel that it's a little thrilling and exciting. You're the only one who has climax again and again. Next to him, Wang Wu lightly flirted with him. The pressure of Dixian was almost fatal for ordinary King Pill, but for the number 1 King Pill in 9 regions, it was just like the breeze after the rain. For Wang Wu's flirting, Wang Lu immediately sneered and retorted, "Tsk, you a necrophile actually have the face to flirt with me? Damn, you're the necrophile." When I said that I benefited a lot, I meant to comprehend the method of cultivation from the immortal spirit energy of the fallen immortal. Do you think I used it as a carrot? Then swear to God that in the past 100 years, you've never used that hand to do anything shameless. I say, do you really think I did something with that hand? Wang Lu said, "With your moral integrity, everything is possible." Wang Wu stopped and stared at her disciple in silence for a long time. I say, you have to think about it clearly. If I really did something with that hand, don't forget, although that hand originally belonged to you, it was later occupied by the fallen immortal for a time. That is to say, the emerald crown on your head is completely in my hands. Enough, I understand, it's my slip of the tongue. Master, you are as pure as ice and as clean as jade. A steel virgin who hasn't been moved for 10,000 years. At most, I would question your moral integrity, but I really shouldn't question your chastity. Your words are not pleasant at all. You make me sound like an old leftover woman. Now is not the time to be happy at all. With that, Wang Lu also stopped. Seriously, Dixian, the fallen immortal. The situation is too sudden, and the pressure is great. Wang Wu said with a smile, come on. Don't say that you really didn't expect this day. When you and the fallen immortal perished together, you should have known that there were other people behind him, right? Moreover, it's not your little King Pill's turn to bear the pressure. The Wanxian League collects such a high fee from all the joining sects every year. So it's time for it to come forward and do something. How about this? I'll go back to the mountain and report the situation to the Tomorrow Sword Hall. You stay here. Wait a minute, it's obviously more appropriate for me to go back. When it comes to credibility, I'm much better than you. Credibility? Yes, you're young and vigorous and your desire is vigorous. But you still have something to do here, so it's not easy for you to go back to the mountain, right? Something to do? What is it? Before he could finish his words, Wang Lu couldn't go on. In the distance, the beautiful figures of Lu Li and the others were clearly discernible. Damn it, when will this charaba come to an end? Chapter 590. In the Wanxian League, the Management Committee of the Tomb of Immortals excavation had held 6 consecutive meetings in 10 days. Each meeting was presided over by a supreme-level cultivator, and the participants were all famous tyrants. There were leaders of major sects, leaders of immortal cultivation families, respected seniors among the loose cultivators, and even many spirit beasts who had gained wisdom and occupied a mountain as the king. In the last few meetings, people even saw the figures of evil cultivators. Such a specification and density could be said to have never been seen in the past 100 years. The last similar meeting was when Shangjing sect tried to promote its 9-region strategy through the Wanxian League. However, the successive meetings were still held without any result. If there was a meeting with a higher specification than the current one, it would be during the last Great War of Immortals and Demons. The entire Wanxian League was in action, which was an unprecedented grand occasion. The Management Committee of the Tomb of Immortals made a big move precisely for the recovery of Dixian and the ensuing crisis of the fallen immortals. As a matter of fact, the fallen immortal was no secret among the high-level members of the Wanxian League. The tragedy of Lingjian School 150 years ago had long sounded the alarm for everyone. However, in order to maintain the basic stability of the entire immortal cultivation world, the news of the fallen immortal crisis had never spread. It was only mentioned from time to time in the Standing Committee meeting of the Wanxian League, and dealt with accordingly. For example, The assistance from the Wanxian League could not go unnoticed for the Lingjian school to recover from the tragedy of almost being destroyed. When the young and the old were in short supply, not only did they not lose their reputation as a super sect, but they also received strong support in materials. In the end, in the face of the fallen immortal, the sacrifice of Lingjian school was remembered by everyone. However, the real urgent problem now was Dixian. The arrival of the fallen immortal would take at least 100 years, which was a crisis that belonged to the next generation. As the saying goes, one day in heaven is 1 year in the world. For those fallen immortals, it was normal for them to plan for an action for 300 to 500 years. Just like for those Supremes of Unity stage, it was not new for them to go into seclusion for 100 years. The recent meetings were to respond to the challenge of Dixian by coordinating the various forces under the jurisdiction of the Wanxian League, unifying their thoughts and avoiding fighting. However, it was not difficult to see from the frequency of the meetings that the progress of the meetings was not smooth. How could it be easy to convince those big sects to put aside their years of grudges and unite against the outside world in a short period of time? Moreover, it would take a lot of effort just to get them to accept the fact that they were competing with Dixian. On this day, another high-level meeting was held. The leaders of the Wanxian League and the excavation management once again gathered in the high-level meeting room in Fengdu City. After Supreme Hichu, who presided over the meeting, read the report aloud, some representatives quickly raised doubts. Supreme Hichu, for the time being, we accept all the assumptions put forward in your report, including the existence of the fallen immortals and the possibility that they may come to 9 regions and cause a disaster. But, because of this, I have to ask, is it really necessary for us to fight to the death with the Dixian people before dealing with the crisis of the fallen immortals? Since we're on the same level, and the Dixian are far superior to us in terms of experience and strength, isn't it better for them to lead the battle? Why add to the internal frictions? As soon as his voice fell, there were many voices of agreement. Obviously, these people had already discussed that they would rely on the number of people to strengthen their momentum. Supreme Hichu, who was sitting in the main seat, slightly glanced at them. However, just before he could answer, a young voice coldly interrupted and responded unceremoniously. Supreme Hichu, I think there's something wrong with the arrangement of our meeting. Even this kind of trash, no plankton trash is allowed to come in and talk nonsense. We don't have so much time to waste on trash. Before he could finish his words, the person who had just retorted slapped the table and stood up. Who are you calling trash? Who else but you? You're just the acting sect leader of a middle-rank sect, a mere deity stage cultivator. Letting you attend the meeting is already an extra-legal kindness. Who gave you the right to speak here? Didn't your parents teach you self-knowledge? You've been cultivating for 500 years. Haven't you realized the fact that you're a waste? You, being rebuked, that person was so angry that his face turned pale. You're just a little king pill, how dare you? I am a member of the Excavation Management Committee, the discoverer and the opener of the group of immortal tombs, the trigger and coordinator of the Dixian incident. Any one of these identities, you can't even dream of them in your entire life. Every word that I say to you should be cherished and engraved in your heart, and as a family heirloom, pass it down from generation to your doomed group of good-for-nothing descendants. The premise is that you can find a stupid enough woman to give birth to your descendants. Just as the imposing manner of Wang Lu in the front row of the venue became more and more fierce, Supreme Hichu waved his hand and said, Wang Lu, that's enough. Wang Lu immediately shut his mouth and did not speak. At the same time, the person who had been rained with dog blood by him was directly sent out of the venue. The venue was quiet for a while. Seeing that everyone had stopped talking, Wang Lu put on a smile and said, Isn't it better to do this earlier? These small sects trash shouldn't be allowed to come in. The inheritance of the group of immortal tombs, and the leadership to prepare for the crisis of the fallen immortal are beyond their reach. For them, instead of spending their own strength to fatten our several big sects, it's better to show their sense of existence, show off their lofty and unyielding character, and at the same time hug the thigh of Dixian. This kind of trash will only hold us back. There's no value in fighting for it. Wang Lu. Supreme Hichu's 2 long eyebrows trembled slightly. That's enough. Wang Lu refused to let it go. You are the leader of the Wanxian League, a person of virtue and prestige, and your words and deeds are bound by rules and regulations. But I'm different. I'm a junior, a mere king pill guy. Even if I say something wrong, it can be regarded as a child's talk. Therefore, I might as well say some ugly words first. Today, in addition to the members of the two committees, there are also some leaders of middle rank and even low rank sections. What I said just now is actually to you. Although it's unpleasant to hear, ask yourselves, don't you think that this fight with Dixian has nothing to do with you? Because, in the end, the fat meat of the group of immortal tombs is the meal on the plate of those top rank sects, and you can only drink 2 mouthfuls of leftover soup at most. I have to say you're right. Even if we win the battle against the Earth Immortals, it's not your turn to enjoy the most delicious spoils of war, because you can't make enough contributions. In addition to having a large number of people, no matter in which aspect, you're completely different from those top rank sections. Giving you a few mouthfuls of leftover soup is already merciful. Before he could finish his words, Wang Lu's vision blurred and he was sent out of the venue. As a member of the Excavation Management Committee and the Plentiful City Management Committee, among the people present, only Supreme Hichu had the qualification and ability to directly expel him. After he too made his move, there were a lot of discussions in the venue. The leaders of the small and medium-sized sects had different expressions, but most of them were happy to see it happen. Wang Lu's spicy and even vicious words were difficult to digest even for those who were successful in cultivation. More importantly, they couldn't tell whether those were the words of Wang Lu alone, or the collective opinion of the Wanxian League Excavation Management Committee. Hichu Daoren acquiesced in his endless words. Was that implying that he was supporting him? If Hichu Daoren also had the same intention, then the following days of these small and medium-sized sects would be very difficult. At that time, in order to protect themselves, they would have to make some unpleasant moves. Fortunately, Hichu Daoren finally forcibly expelled Wang Lu. It seemed like he didn't want the relationship with the many small and medium-sized sects to become stiff. Therefore, he chose to sacrifice Wang Lu. Being driven out of the venue like this was quite a shameful thing. At the same time, the Shangjing sect elder beside he too was also slightly hesitant. Using primordial spirit, he whispered, "Senior brother sect leader, Wang Lu is, after all, however." He too only chuckled. That kid has been noisy for so long. His words are high-sounding, but in fact, none of them are sincere. He doesn't want to help me say the ugly words first. He's simply impatient sitting here and begging me to let him out. Huh. The Shangjing sect elder said incredulously. In such an important meeting, I heard that he recently encountered some particularly thorny private matters. Thorny private matters? It's good to be young. Senior brother? Let's not talk about him first. Humph, that kid looks down on us, the old seniors, too much. Does he think that only a little guy like him dares to speak bluntly? What a joke. Then Supreme He too ended the conversation in the primordial spirit, coughed and said, "What Wang Lu said just now is exactly what I mean." Suddenly the audience went into an uproar. He too ignored the discussion of the crowd and directly said, "I know that everyone in the meeting has their own plans. For the benefit of the sect, for the benefit of the individual, these are all understandable. But now, the matter is of great importance. So there is no time to coordinate and weigh the interests of each party present. Therefore, I will only say the conclusion and everyone has the right to accept it. To put it simply, today I called you here not to discuss but to inform. Supreme is a straightforward person which saves us a lot of trouble. The excavation management has held a series of meetings in the past few days. Presumably, they have already discussed a mature plan with the major high-rank sections. During this period, we have never had the opportunity to speak. Until today, Supreme is even more outspoken, so we can only accept it. In the eyes of the Wanxian League, these small and medium-sized sects are really worthless. That being the case, he too coldly said, "Your value is reflected in the amount of your contribution. If your contribution is high, it doesn't mean that you can't eat the meat. If your contribution is low, even the 5 greats of the Wanxian League don't have the right to enjoy the spoils of war. You can choose not to help, but if you dare to obstruct us, or even take advantage of the opportunity to join Dixian's side, The Wanxian League will let you see what happens to traitors. When Taoist He said these words with the power of a supreme, many of the heads of the sects present only felt a great shock to their hearts and minds, losing all their five senses, and an indescribable sense of fear drowned them like a tide. When they regained their senses, the meeting had already ended. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.